TV, on radio and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 10.
Good morning, I'm Emily Rose Adams. Boris Johnson says he's confident of winning a second term as Prime Minister and wants to see in a third. Despite backbenchers reportedly plotting to oust him, he's pledged to lead the Conservatives into the next election and into the 2030s, which would make him Britain's longest-serving post-war Prime Minister. Well, the Prime Minister is expected to say now is not the time to give up on Ukraine, as he's arrived in Munich for the start of the G7 summit. The UK, US, Canada and Japan have already this morning announced a joint ban on imports of Russian gold, with exports being worth £12.5 billion to the Kremlin in 2021. And crossbench peer and former Foreign Office diplomat Lord MacDonald's told us this year's G7 would see more decisive action.
And since the invasion of Ukraine, there is a clear need for this group of people to work together. So I think that this year's summit in Bavaria will be particularly purposeful, and I think that there will be results that everybody can see and whose effects all countries, including Russia, will be aware of.
And in Ukraine, there's been fresh strikes on the capital Kyiv with 5 people injured. The mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, said it was an attempt to intimidate Ukraine before the G7 summit.
The building has been destroyed, and we understand there are many people under the rubble. They are alive. The rescuers are trying to get them out. There is a lot of smoke, and we are doing our best to rescue them as soon as possible.
Police in South Africa are investigating after at least 17 people were reported to have been found dead at a nightclub. East Cape Police said it was too early to determine the cause of death of the young adults who were aged between 18 and 20 years old. Clarence House is insisting correct processes were followed after Prince Charles reportedly accepted a suitcase filled with almost £1 million in cash from a controversial Qatari politician. A spokesperson says donations from former Prime Minister Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim were passed immediately to one of his charities. Killer drivers could face up to life in prison as new sentencing rules come into force this week. New legislation will see judges able to hand life sentences to dangerous drivers who kill and careless drivers who kill while under the influence of drink or drugs. And a survey's found wedding guests are finding creative ways to save costs this year by staying up all night, travelling on public transport and wearing the same outfit on multiple occasions. Experians say nearly a quarter of people surveyed said they could not afford to accept all of their wedding invitations. And now it's time for today's weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
Low pressure continues to sit over the northwest of the UK through today, bringing brisk winds and showers to many western parts. The best of the sunshine will be in the east. Taking a look at the picture for midday, northern Scotland will be bright with some sunny spells. However, across the rest of Scotland, it will be blustery with outbreaks of showery rain with highs of 13 to 15 Celsius. Frequent heavy showers across Northern Ireland, but winds easing in the west. Cloudy with blustery showers for western parts of northern England, sunniest in the east. The sunshine extending across the Midlands and East Anglia with just the odd shower, and cloudier skies for Wales and southwest England with brisk winds and the risk of some showers. The rest of the southern England will see some sunshine with highs of 19 Celsius. Little change into this evening. The best of the drier weather in the southeast with further blustery showers in the northwest.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
The bosses at Talk TV have given me and Mike Graham our own show on Saturday nights. Why am I doing this on my own? It's because Mike Graham's late again. He's always late. I'm sick of this. I was promised Piers Morgan. Now I've got to work with Mike Graham. I've had it.
And a very good morning to one and all. Yes, it's Sunday morning. It's just after 10 o'clock. It is the 26th of June, and for the next 3 hours, it's time for Tice Talk, when we look at the big issues of the week just gone by, but also what's coming up in the week ahead. And my goodness me, there is a huge, huge amount to talk about. So much I might even have to creep into Trisha Goddard's show after mine. In the first hour, after my blockbuster Sunday sermon that I know is going to irritate lots of you and shock lots more. After that, we're going to be talking with Trevor Kavanagh about the impact of the by-elections. How long is the Prime Minister likely to stay in office? We've got to talk about the Bill of Rights, European Convention on Human Rights, whether or not that will actually pass through the House of Lords. In the second hour, again, more shocking news, this time from Alison Pearson. She wrote an article in The Telegraph this week about the latest review on management quality in the NHS. Again, turned out not to be what it was all cooked up to be. We've got to talk about travel disruption with the summer holidays facing us. Will you be able to get away? If so, where, when and why? Whether or not your flights have already been cancelled. And then the third hour, in terms of the week ahead, this is a massive week for the shale gas industry, the opportunity, in my view, to level up by drilling down. We'll be having the lobbyist, the policy director for the shale gas industry here in the studio to answer your questions. Don't miss that just after 12 o'clock in the third hour. And of course, the latest news on Ukraine. So much with some great guests. We've got MPs, we've got commentators, journalists, experts, but most important of all, I've got you watching, listening, and I want your input, your views, please. You know the number. It is, of course, 0344 499 1000. Or you can tweet us at Talk TV or text us 87222 using the word talk. Last week I was completely swamped by messages and tweets, but I'll do the best I can to read them all out, because of course the show is much better with your input, your interaction and your thoughts, whether you agree or disagree with me. Stay with us. You're listening to Tice Talk. It is, of course, Talk TV. Yes, indeed, that wonderful opening music is, of course, the introduction to my Sunday sermon. And I like generally to focus on a particular issue, a particular word, a particular subject in my Sunday sermon. And this week, I thought I'd focus on the benefit system. You may have heard me talk about the 5.3 million people now on out of work benefits, and I wanted to sort of explore it in a bit more detail and understand who can claim what, because I think we all want our benefit system to be a genuinely fair system that does what it was designed to do, which is to look after the genuinely sick, disabled, vulnerable, and those who are out of work and genuinely looking for work. That's what it was designed to do. That's what it should do. That's what we all want it to do. But I'm a bit concerned that something is going badly wrong. And I thought, what better exercise than to try it out? And you can do this at home, because you can go onto a variety of websites and they'll give you a sort of a calculator as to what you can earn. So I want you to imagine that you are middle-aged, you've got a partner, another half, whether it's a wife or a husband, and you've got a couple of kids, both under the age of 16. So just put yourself in that picture, and you're struggling a bit, to be honest. Your back's a bit painful, you're not feeling great, maybe you've got some mental health issues, just not quite right, and then also you had COVID. And again, you're just not quite sure, you're sort of firing on all cylinders. So maybe you've got that thing called long COVID. And the thing about all those three issues is they can be absolutely genuine, but also you can't actually prove or disprove really any of them. So anyway, you're feeling rough. You're not really sure that you're well enough to go to work. So you need to sign on as being unable to work. Now, your other half, your partner, is caring for mum, 85-year-old mum who lives just round the corner, and so that's a full-time role. And let's say that's your wife who's caring for her mother, and she's doing that for the majority of the week. So she's not able to go to work. You've got 2 kids. They're both under the age of 16, great kids, and you're renting a house about 10 years old in the Midlands, and you're paying about £1,000 a month for rent. And you used to go to work, but do you know what? The boss he was always so demanding. And the people I worked with, well, one of them was a bit grumpy. One of them, well, I just didn't really get on with him, didn't agree with his views, and had a bit of furlough money. And then I thought, I'm not feeling great. Why should I bother? Let's see what I can get on benefits, shall we? So, you tap all those things in. The fact that I'm not feeling great, so I consider myself unable to work for health reasons. My wife's a carer, we're renting a house, and we've got 2 children. What do you think is the amount that you could claim on benefits according to this website that I looked at? Well, I think you may be quite surprised. Just write down a number quickly. What do you think you can claim per week? Grab a pen, think about it, and jot it down. 300 a week? 350 a week? 400 a week? 450 a week? What do you think that number might be? I'll tell you, folks, and I'm afraid I think this will shock you. £570 per week. Oh, I forgot the 32 pence. 570 quid and 32 pence a week. That's about £29,000. Just think about that. That's a whisker under the average national salary. Now, of course, if you're out there working, you pay NI and you pay tax on earnings above £12,500. Here's another thing. Almost all of your benefits, almost all of them, are not taxed. You're paying no tax on the vast majority of your benefits. So the truth is, in order to earn an equivalent amount net, because you actually want to get up, you want to get out of the house, you want to go to work, you want to mentally challenge yourself, to be stimulated by achieving, by doing, by helping a company grow, you want to contribute to your community, to your to the local community, and indeed to the broader economy. In which case, you need to be earning £35,000, £36,000, £37,000 in order to get the same net take-home pay as the family that I've just described that is on benefits because neither parent can work. I think something is going badly, badly wrong. Is this the reason why there's about 1.5 million more people on benefits than pre-COVID? So we've now got 5.3 million people on out-of-work benefits, 1 in 8 of the working age population, despite the fact we've got a labour shortage, despite the fact we've got lots of the Ramona lobbying groups saying we need to open the borders again because there's a labour shortage. I have to be honest, there's no labour shortage, there's no people shortage. What there is too many people for whom actually work doesn't pay. And the greatest shock for me this week, the greatest tragedy, was when an employer came up to me, and he actually runs a domiciliary care business. Try to say that on a Sunday morning. And he said one of his team had left because she had worked out that actually she would earn more on benefits than on the work she was doing, the great work she was doing, the much appreciated work that she was doing as a care worker, care visits to people's home. And you think, what is going on here? Have we got this badly, badly wrong? I think we have. I'm really, really troubled. And if we don't get this right, then actually a whole generation of people are going to miss out on the advantages of work. But I want your thoughts, your views. How many people of that 5.3 million people are those who are genuinely in need, who are genuinely sick and disabled and unwell, or genuinely out of work and looking for work hard. Of the 5.3 million people, is it 2 million? Is it 2.5 million? Is it 3 million? Is it 4 million? Or maybe you think that actually all 5.3 million are genuinely in need and out of work, can't work, or are looking for a job. That, ladies and gentlemen, is my big question to you this morning. 5.3 million people. Is that the right number? What do you think it should be? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. And with that, here endeth this morning's Sunday Sermon. Well, there we are. That was my Sunday sermon. I have to say, when I typed that into the online benefits calculator, I actually had to read it and reread it and reread it again because I was so astonished by what I learnt. And that's why I've set this big question to all of you. What do you think's the real number? We want an efficient, fair benefit system that genuinely looks after the many people who are sick, who are disabled, who are genuinely ill and in need, and those who are out of work and genuinely looking for work. But I think that number is somewhat less than the 5.3 million that are on out-of-work benefits. There is a fundamental structural flaw in the system. And just this week, the Chancellor said, in his generosity, that he's going to increase the benefits by, I think, the rate of inflation. Although most of us in work know that we're not going to get a pay rise anything like the rate of inflation. Give us a call, you know the number, or tweet us at TalkTV or text us 87222, because I want your views, your thoughts. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe it is 5.3 million people. Anyway, coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to the amazing political columnist at The Sun. You must read his regular weekly columns, Trevor Kavanagh, with his thoughts about the implications for the Prime Minister and indeed the Conservative Party after this week's by-election results and resignation. Stay with us, don't go anywhere. It's Tice Talk. It is, of course, Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk TV, live from the Talk Radio studios. There's clouds in the sky, and I have to say, I think there's some clouds at the headquarters of the Conservative Party this weekend, because the week just gone was a disaster for them and potentially for the Prime Minister in terms of the two by-election results that took place on Thursday. The results announced in the early hours of Friday morning. And Wakefield was probably expected to go back to Labour, but the loss of one of the safest Conservative seats in the country to the Lib Dems down in Tiverton and Honiton, I think, was really shocking. It was one of those moments where people thought it might happen, but it's the reality when you're actually staring the results in the face that actually this has happened. And so the newspapers over the weekend and this morning are just full of the implications, the gossip, who's going to do what, will there be a leadership challenge, will the 1922 change the rules? Who better than Trevor Kavanagh, the columnist, political columnist at The Sun, to dissect these issues. Trevor, thanks for joining me on Tice Talk this Sunday morning. So you've seen all this before, Trevor, over the years. By-elections come and go, midterms. It's hard for a government in office. Quite often you get a bit of a slap round the face. What are your thoughts? Is this just a gentle slap round the face, or is the Prime Minister in trouble once again?
Good morning, Richard. Well, I think that the weekend has shown that the Tories are in complete disarray. They're running around like headless chickens, wondering what to do next. And to be honest, that's an enormous advantage to Boris Johnson. In theory, he should be done and dusted. He should be the cock of the walk one day and a feather duster the next, or today, indeed. It's not the case, actually. I think that while he is personally very badly damaged by these election results, I think that the view is that there's no one else they can actually coalesce around in the Tory party to take his place. And it's not the first leader who's been in this position. The same applied to John Major at one point. That is his greatest strength at the moment. I think the consensus now, grudgingly, is that he will last at least until the Tory conference in October, which is a very major success in its own right if he gets that far. Whether he reaches the next general election, which could be anywhere between now and 2024 or 25, is less certain. But I suspect he will, just simply because of the chaos within the party.
But they obviously didn't expect the honourable resignation of the chairman, Oliver Dowden, a loyalist through and through. And in a sense, maybe he fell on his sword before he was pushed. But I thought his resignation letter, was very, very telling, given he's a loyalist. It was the last few words: he remains loyal to the Conservative Party. What happens, Trevor, if another cabinet minister goes? Is that enough, or would it require much, much more than that?
Well, that is the acid test, I think, Richard. Oliver Dowden's a very nice man and says some actually quite interesting things, but I doubt if many people, apart from you and me, have ever heard of him. So his actual departure is no great blow to the government. You're right, if any of the other heavyweight cabinet team decided to walk, I'm talking about the major ones, the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, the Chancellor, the Defence Secretary. Those are the ones whose departure would really cut the ground from under Boris. There is no sign whatsoever of any of that happening, indeed, by anyone in the actual cabinet, as far as I've heard so far.
I mean, that's fascinating, and yet, so you had the Prime Minister saying that he's listening to voters, but the voters have just told him something, I think pretty clearly, and his response to that is, I want to stay until 2030. It seems the two don't quite match, Trevor.
No, they don't, but that's Boris. I mean, Boris thrives on this sort of division and dissent. It leaves him the greasy pig if its situation applies again. This is the man who manages to escape the most impossible traps, and yet somehow or other everybody else is falling flat on their face while he disappears up the road to freedom. But the thing is that what they're looking at is they're disinterring the evidence that they glean from these two by-elections. First of all, the most damaging thing, the most dangerous thing from the Tories is what is clearly the emergence of a Lib-Lab pact. tactical voting gave Liberals a resounding victory in Tiverton, and the Labour Party a slender victory, really, in Wakefield. And the other point about this is that if you look at one opinion poll, and of course opinion polls are of no account whatsoever, but simply as indicators, the opinion poll in the Sun today, the Sun on Sunday, gives the Labour Party a mere 3% lead over the government, which is almost an insult to Keir Starmer, who, to rub the salt in even further, is 1 point behind Boris Johnson as the person that voters see as a good Prime Minister.
But this is the remarkable thing. You're saying that the Conservative Party can't sort of coalesce around a replacement. But the idea that, I mean, they've got over 350 MPs. The idea that there's no one amongst those who is good enough, capable enough, qualified enough to be Prime Minister is surely a nonsense. Or is it actually that they're not sure if any of them could win an election for the Conservative Party? Because the two are quite distinct and quite separate.
Well, I think actually it's a wider commentary on the quality and stature of our politicians generally. The same applies in the Labour Party. Apart from Keir Starmer, is there anyone who actually stands out as the person people are lusting for as the next Prime Minister? The Liberal Democrats are led by someone very, very few people could name. And in the Tory party, most of the people who would be jostling for Boris's job, were he to go, are members of his cabinet who are at the moment declared and avowed loyalists. So there is, apart from Tom Tugendhat on the backbenches, who doesn't have universal support simply because he's a diehard Remainer, which is a major issue in all of this as far as the Conservative Party is concerned. There is no one, and I can't name anyone else who literally stands out as a potential Prime Minister.
And Trevor, there's a bit of chatter around this sort of rather technical thing called the 1922 committee, which is the sort of the committee for backbenchers, whether they might change their rules in order to try and advance the possibility of another vote of no confidence in their leader. Is this just idle chat? They've got some sort of new elections, re-elections of their committee members coming up. Do you apply sort of any credibility to this?
Well, it is idle chat, but it's very vigorous idle chat among those representing the 148 MPs who voted against Boris last time. But the rest of the party, and indeed I suspect many of those 148, realise that were they now to rip up the rules just weeks after an attempted leadership coup and try and do it again sometime in the next 6 months, I think that they must surely realise that this is just a suicide idea. This is the public simply would not vote for them next time. It would be an abject act of surrender, and I think it would be incredibly self-indulgent and pointless.
So you think that that should be less likely. Trevor, thank you so much indeed for your thoughts and views. That's Trevor Kavanagh, the highly experienced, very wise political columnist at The Sun. He is well worth reading every week in The Sun with his thoughts, his views. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. We'll be taking your messages, your tweets, your calls straight after the news. You're listening, of course, to Tice Talk here at the home of common sense. It is, of course, Talk TV.
Mike and Kevin's ice cream for snowflakes. Indulge in our deliciously sanctimonious flavors. Extinction Raspberryan, Cancel Culture and Cream, Cookie Double Warming, Non-Bineberry, Woca-Cola, Ginger Nut, and Vanilla. All made from our organic gender fluid. Mike and Kevin's ice cream for snowflakes.
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Emily Rose Adams. Boris Johnson says he's confident of winning a second term as Prime Minister and wants to see in a third. Despite backbenchers reportedly plotting to oust him, he's pledged to lead the Conservatives into the next election and into the 2030s. Well, Boris Johnson has confirmed a ban on the import of Russian gold as he's arrived in Munich for the start of the G7 summit. Gold exports were worth £12.6 billion to Russia in 2021, but the UK, US, Canada and Japan have announced a joint plan. And crossbench peer and former Foreign Office diplomat Lord MacDonald says this year's G7 would see more decisive action.
And since the invasion of Ukraine, there is a clear need for this group of people to work together. So I think that this year's summit in Bavaria will be particularly purposeful, and I think that there will be results that everybody can see and whose effects all countries, including Russia, will be aware of.
And in Ukraine, there's been fresh strikes on the capital Kyiv with 5 people injured. The mayor Vitaly Klitschko said it was an attempt to intimidate Ukraine before the G7 summit. Police in South Africa are investigating after at least 17 people were reported to have been found dead at a nightclub. East Cape Police said it was too early to determine the cause of death of the young adults who were aged between 18 and 20 years old. And a survey's found wedding guests are finding creative ways to save costs this year by staying up all night, travelling on public transport and wearing the same outfit on multiple occasions. Experians say nearly a quarter of people said they could not afford to accept all of their wedding invitations, while more than half said it had become more acceptable to pay for drinks and food at the reception. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk this Sunday morning. There's quite a lot of clouds out there in the sky, and indeed on my Twitter feed there's some people who agree with me, but also it's important to say there's some people who disagree with me. And I thought I'd get to that first, actually, because I've got I think it's a text message from someone, I think, with the initials UEL Ballymena, who says, Richard, with his attack on the poor, the sick and the vulnerable in society, is a new low. Stop scapegoating the poor. Actually, I'm doing directly, deliberately the opposite. I was very clear, at pains to point out that I want an efficient, effective benefit system that looks after the sick, the disabled, those who are genuinely in need and those who are genuinely out of work, looking for work. But if you actually follow me and what I said last week, for example, the policies that I promote, that I put forward, is actually to help the least well off, the lowest paid, the poorest in society, because I want to lift the level at which people start paying any income tax from £12,500 a year to £20,000 a year. That's an extra £30 a week in everybody's pocket. That increases the money to those on low pay, the poorest in society, and it increases the incentive to work. That's the whole point of it. So I'm very grateful for your view, but actually everything I do, and the other policies that we've been promoting, cutting tax on fuel duty by 20p a litre, that proportionately helps the least well off in society in their driving to work or wherever they're going. So that's what I've been trying to do. But UEL probably disagrees. Anyway, let's see what Tracy thinks in Merseyside. Good morning, Tracy. How are you doing? What's on your mind?
Everything you said, I have to disagree with you.
To agree or disagree, Tracy? Sorry, I just lost the line there.
Sorry, I'm originally from Ireland, but I live in Merseyside, and I came here when I was 12. Basically, what it is I came over here and with my family because of troubles, and then my family moved back when I was 18, and I worked 72 hours a week. I worked and worked and worked and worked and worked, but now because I've got COPD, my son was just diagnosed with autism. We can't get any services here. We don't get nothing free.
And just help me, Tracy. So you've got COPD.
Stage 4, yeah.
Okay, and your son's got autism, but you've been working,
yeah,
and so you've...
No, sorry, I'll retract. Basically what it was is from the age of 18, we moved to England.
Yes.
And, I'm telling a lie, we moved over when I was 12, but I started working here when I was 18, and I was doing 72 hours a week. I bought my own house. I'd done 3 bags full, you know.
So you've been working your socks off for many years, it sounds like.
Yeah. And now, because I've got the OPD, I'm literally on benefits. But because now my son was diagnosed with autism when he was 12, I'm not married to a Scouser. I was married to a Dutch boy. Basically, he just came up and had got the, do you know what you call it, EU card or
yes,
remain
sure.
Basically.
So Tracy, you've been working hard, but now you're genuinely in need, as I referred to in my sermon. That's the whole point of the benefit system, to look after those genuinely in need. So is it working for you?
No.
And help me, why not? Is it too slow, too inefficient, or do you not qualify for whatever reason?
Oh, I don't qualify for anything because of the national insurance number I've been paying. It doesn't qualify for me. I've got to go to a thingamajig up the road, and you've got to pay like £5 and you can get 15 items of food where other people have donated. It's not the food bank. It's got nothing to do with like being on benefits. It's nothing. But because of like my income or the property I live in, I'm not entitled to that.
Right. Okay. Because you've had a high income, and that's right. And actually, there was one important thing, which is to claim those level of benefits, you have to have a less than a certain amount in your bank account. Otherwise, there are deductions. So, but are you getting any help from the benefit system, or are you?
They put me on this new thing called income support, and now I've been on it for 2 years, but now I was getting family allowance for my son, but my son now is going to university. That's all stopped, and I'm not getting tax credits anymore, and so. Right.
Well, Tracy,
don't get any of them benefits anymore.
Yeah. Well, Tracy, I hope you get the help that you need, and I hope that your son, is able to get better to the best possible way, so that you can get back to work yourself as well, and contribute to your family. I think I may have. You still there, Tracy? We may have lost you.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. I've got COPD stage 4. I can't.
You can't. No, well, Tracy. Thank you for calling and sharing that with us, and our thoughts are with you. And Tracy there, she's in genuine need and is not getting the help. My concern is the benefit system is not working properly, as it should. Lots of messages coming in and tweets, and we've got another call here from Jackie, who is in Manchester. Morning, Jackie.
Good morning, Richard. There's a few things I would like to point out.
Thanks. Great, go for it.
The majority of people are in work benefits. In the last 12 years, the economy has only grown, on average, 1.4%, which is minimal. So we've had wage stagnation. We've also had an economy that was shut down for 2 years, where solvent people lost their jobs. Businesses also shed the workforce because they were laden with debt, with bounce-back loans, etc., etc. Now, my situation is that I worked for the NHS for 23 years. A patient fell on me, has left me disabled. I've got compression of my spinal cord, etc. And apart from my small pension that I get disability benefits. And I just want to point out that the majority of claims that go through, it is not easy. The DWP do not make it easy in any shape or form. I'll give you, for instance, at the assessment centres, they put bollards halfway up the road so that cars can't drop off disabled people at the door, so they're made to walk.
That's helpful, Jackie. So your view is that actually it's not easy. Do you feel, and I just want to clarify there, to be clear, on out-of-work benefits is 5.3 million, on in-work benefits is just over 3 million. But I think what you're saying, Jackie, because I'm going to have to go to the break soon, is that do you think it's working fairly? Do you think they are well organised to identify the genuinely in need and help as opposed to those that are not?
Yeah, I do, because if you look at people who don't get the claims, 84% of people win at tribunal.
Right.
So they're actually they're discarding a lot of people that have genuine claims because of how the system is.
Interesting. That's very helpful, Jackie. Thank you so much for your thoughts. So that's Jackie there in Manchester saying that actually she's on disability allowance, but she thinks that the process is rigorous and fair. So that brings back the question, I guess really, is what are there others for whom they're getting benefits who shouldn't get benefits? Lots of tweets and messages coming in. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000 with your thoughts, your views. Do you agree with Jackie? Is that your experience or what? Coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to Peter Bone, Conservative MP, about the other thing that's being introduced to the House of Commons, the new Bill of Rights to try and bring back control over our laws to the United Kingdom. We'll be talking to him. He's the Conservative MP for Wellingborough. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're well through the first hour of my show here on Talk TV. Lots of messages, calls and tweets coming in. We were talking just before the break to a lady who had stage 4 COPD, and someone quite rightly has just tweeted in. Anne-Marie said she should be eligible for the PIP, as that has no pay threshold, so that there should be some benefits available to her. Thanks for that, Anne-Marie. Lots of other messages I will get back to later, because I've got my second guest of the morning on the line, the Conservative MP for Wellingborough, well-known Brexiteer Peter Bone, to talk about some of the bills going through Parliament, in particular the new domestic Bill of Rights that Dominic Raab has tabled to the House of Commons. Peter, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you can hear me all right. So here we are. It's been quite an interesting week. Lots of legislation, or interesting fortnight. Lots of legislation going forward, and then 2 by-election results. First, Peter, if we can talk about this new Bill of Rights, which is clearly very important, particularly to us Brexiteers who wanted to take back control of our laws, borders and money, and properly be in charge of our own sovereignty. Can you just sort of help us, Peter? What's this really going to achieve, and what's the timing of this bill in terms of how quickly that it can become law?
Well, first of all, if you can hear me successfully.
Yeah, I can hear you, but there's quite an echo, which I suspect is going to be not great, Peter. Just try again. That's better. Yeah, if you put your phone to ear, Peter, lovely job. How's that?
Well, you can remember when we were part of the Go movement, we wanted to make laws in our own country, judged by our own judges. Now, that was to do, of course, with the EU and the European Court of Justice. But it also applies to the European Court of Human Rights, because they are making decisions against the will of Parliament. And it seems to me that Dominic Raab has always wanted to correct that, and that's what hopefully his bill does.
And how long will it take to go through the House of Commons and then splutter through the House of Lords? Because clearly, if we want to do this, we want to get on with it. That's the whole point of having a large majority.
Yes, going through the House of Commons will, I think, be a fairly easy process. We'll have the committee stage and the report, and as normal. But it's when it gets to the House of Lords, if they try and delay, or worse still, defeat the will of Parliament and the British people, then I think we're in a constitutional situation and reform of the House of Lords.
Indeed, because the key thing, and some of us are using the expression, in order to complete Brexit, we should leave the European Convention on Human Rights and therefore the European Court, because we should have the confidence in our own wise, experienced and highly respected judiciary. But this Bill of Rights doesn't do that, even though many Conservatives, indeed even Theresa May, just before she was Prime Minister, she herself said that the UK should look to leave it.
You're right. I introduced a private member's bill only a few weeks ago, which would take us out of the European Convention on Human Rights and have our own Bill of Rights. Since then, the government has acted and is introducing a British Bill of Rights. What we don't know, Richard, is whether this will solve the problem. So I asked that to the Justice Secretary, Dominic Raab, this week. I said, if it fails, if it doesn't achieve what we want, if it doesn't allow us to deport dangerous criminals or economic migrants coming across the channel to Rwanda, if it doesn't allow us to do that, would he support my private member's bill? And I thought he gave a nod in that direction. I think the government is so frustrated by the interference of the European Court on what Parliament decides.
Okay, but Peter, that all takes time, and I'm not a very patient guy, and I suspect many other Brexiteers are not that patient, because if the House of Lords delay it, it's 9, 12 months. You and I know that, during which time More foreign criminals have come out of jail and haven't been able to be deported. No flights go to Rwanda. There's no alternative plan. These rulings from the ECHR, as I understand, actually they're advisory, but we always sort of want to be seen to do the right thing, and therefore we always comply. What about the government growing a really steel backbone and saying, until we've got this Bill of Rights through, we're not going to listen to those ECHR rulings?
Well, I think it's a strong argument. I mean, Dominic Raab was furious that injunctions were issued by the European Court, which he didn't think they had any power to do. And we have some precedent in the fact when the court decided we had to give prisoners the vote, we ignored it. So I think those are one of the practical options if we run into trouble with the House of Lords. And it has to remember, this goes back to a referendum decision. Nobody could argue that the referendum wasn't about returning power to this country. And we can't still have European judges overruling the British Parliament and the British courts.
Completely. So you think that the Justice Secretary is genuinely on side? In a sense, if the bill goes through, I suppose what he would argue is if the government then uses that British Bill of Rights, it doesn't need to go the final step, the extra mile of leaving the ECHR. That's his argument. But I think you're like me. You're not really there. You want the absolute certainty.
I would go with absolute certainty, but I'm also prepared to give the government the chance. But of course, Dominic Raab has been, long before he became Justice Secretary, has wanted to do this. And I'm absolutely sure that he will do everything within his power to make it successful. But I think there is the opportunity for us to take action if it fails, or if unelected members of the House of Lords try and delay it.
Well, I would like serious reform of the House of Lords. Peter, before we let you go, I do want to touch also on another really important bill for the United Kingdom that's been tabled in the last couple of weeks, the bill on the Northern Ireland Protocol, because clearly you and I know as Brexiteers that the Northern Ireland issue is really serious. The protocol isn't working. So this has been tabled again. How long do you think this may take to get through? And again, do you think the House of Lords are going to frustrate this really, really serious issue?
I think they're going to have a problem in doing that. We are debating it this week. I think it finishes next week in the Commons. The issue is, can the Lords block something that only the British government wants to do, House of Commons wants to do, but the British people voted for in a referendum? There is no question that the unfinished bit of Brexit is the Northern Ireland Protocol. And the EU is using it to block movement between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That was never part of the. I mean, I went 2 or 3 times to Northern Ireland during the referendum. Everyone knew what the issues were, and we won the referendum. So EU refuses to negotiate. The government should have great credit for taking action. And we need to make sure that goods that are finishing up in Northern Ireland from Great Britain do not have any checks in the RSC.
But again, in terms of timing, Peter, I mean, this could rumble through the Houses of Parliament for up to 12 months, during which time, unless Article 16 is invoked, during which time, essentially, the situation stays the same and it continues to be a disaster for goods travelling across from GB to Northern Ireland and in reverse.
You're right, but I think this is slightly different in the fact that the EU have it in their power to come to us and say, actually, yeah, we're going to operate the Northern Ireland Protocol like it should have been operated, and that there's only going to be checks on goods that finish up in the European Union.
But there's no chance of that happening,
this pressure of the bill might make them see sense. I mean, they will never negotiate unless there is a threat from us that we're going to legislate.
Yeah.
And of course, you're right. we could invoke Article 16 if things stay the same or get worse.
But I suspect they won't now they've got this bill through. Just whilst you've been on, Peter, Jane has messaged in, "Hi, Richard, they can get these bills through when it suits them. There should be no recess until it's sorted out and done." Great message from Jane. There you are, Peter. No summer holidays until you've done it.
Well, I'm all for that. I don't like the government having weeks when they're not being scrutinised. But it's not going to be the House of Commons that fails to do this. It's going to be delaying the Lords. And the Lordships really, I mean, they're stuffed full of Remainers to start with. Your idea of reforming it might well be long overdue.
I think it is, Peter. Thank you so much indeed for your thoughts and views and explanation. That's Peter Bone, Conservative MP for Wellingborough, a strong Brexiteer. He actually introduced his own private member's bill to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. But give us a call, your thoughts, your views, lots of messages coming in and thoughts there. One here, my understanding is that a new Bill of Rights will still give people the right to appeal to the European Convention on Human Rights, the European Court. If that's the case, what is the point? It has no teeth. That is from JC. I have to say, I share that view. Let's get some certainty. Let's complete Brexit. Anyway, coming up after the news, we're going to be talking to the Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson about the NHS. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 11.
Good morning, I'm Emily Rose Adams. A government minister has insisted that Boris Johnson is the right man to lead the Conservatives into the next election after the Prime Minister claimed he wants to serve 3 terms in office. Despite 2 tough by-election losses this week, Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis said Boris Johnson wasn't fully at fault for those defeats. Well, the Prime Minister is expected to say now is not the time to give up on Ukraine as he's arrived in Munich for the start of the G7 summit. The UK, US, Canada and Japan have already this morning announced a joint ban on imports of Russian gold, with exports being worth £12.5 billion to the Kremlin in 2021. Well, crossbench peer and former Foreign Office diplomat Lord MacDonald's told us this year's G7 would see more decisive action.
And since the invasion of Ukraine, there is a clear need for this group of people to work together. So I think that this year's summit in Bavaria will be particularly purposeful, and I think that there will be results that everybody can see and whose effects all countries, including Russia, will be aware of.
And in Ukraine, there's been fresh strikes on the capital Kyiv with 5 people injured. The mayor Vitaly Klitschko said it was an attempt to intimidate Ukraine before the G7 summit.
The building has been destroyed, and we understand there are many people under the rubble. They are alive. The rescuers are trying to get them out. There is a lot of smoke, and we are doing our best to rescue them as soon as possible.
Police in South Africa are investigating after at least 17 people were reported to have been found dead at a nightclub. It happened at a venue in East London on the Eastern Cape province, but police said it was too early to determine the cause of death of the young adults, who were aged between 18 and 20. Clarence House is insisting correct processes were followed after Prince Charles reportedly accepted a suitcase filled with almost £1 million in cash from a controversial Qatari politician. A spokesperson says donations from former Prime Minister Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim were passed immediately to one of his charities. Killer drivers could face up to life in prison as new sentencing rules come into force this week. New legislation will see judges able to hand life sentences to dangerous drivers who kill and careless drivers who kill while under the influence of drink or drugs. And as surveys found wedding guests are finding creative ways to save costs this year by staying up all night, travelling on public transport and wearing the same outfit on multiple occasions. Experians say nearly a quarter of people surveyed said they could not afford to accept all of their wedding invitations. Now it's time for today's weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV weather.
Low pressure continues to sit over the northwest of the UK through today, bringing brisk winds and showers to many western parts. The best of the sunshine will be in the east. Taking a look at the picture for midday, northern Scotland will be bright with some sunny spells. However, across the rest of Scotland, it will be blustery with outbreaks of showery rain with highs of 13 to 15 Celsius. Frequent heavy showers across Northern Ireland, but winds easing in the west. Cloudy with blustery showers for western parts of northern England, sunniest in the east. The sunshine extending across the Midlands and East Anglia with just the odd shower, and cloudier skies for Wales and southwest England with brisk winds and the risk of some showers. The rest of the southern England will see some sunshine with highs of 19 Celsius. Little change into this evening. The best of the drier weather in the southeast with further blustery showers in the northwest.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV weather.
The Sunday Night Club is your club. I'll take you inside the dressing room, from the terraces to the boardroom, to ask the questions you want answered. There is no membership required for the Sunday Night Club from 7.
Welcome back to Tice Talk. We're into the second hour of my 3-hour show. Lots of lovely messages coming in, lots of concerns about the structure of the benefit system, that it's not helping those genuinely need whilst it's allowing some of those who aren't. One message here says, and well done, Richard, great show, but equally you can't please everybody. And Gary, this is the same Gary that last week called me economically illiterate for my tax plans. Well, the good news is he's still watching or listening But he's made his views very clear. He said, Richard, you didn't get many votes. You should give up a career in politics. Well, you can't please everybody. Equally, it's good to take, the good, the bad and the ugly, different people's views. And talking of views and understanding the real issues, I'm delighted to welcome the next guest on my show in the second hour, Alison Pearson, who is the well-known columnist at the Daily Telegraph and also the co-host of an amazing podcast weekly called Planet Normal. And it really is just that. It's Planet Normal. And Alison wrote an article this week in the Telegraph about how the NHS, that we all want to be brilliant and the best in the world, a world-beating, world-leading service, sadly, yet again, not only is wasting our money, but has just conducted another big review by a well-decorated soldier, a general no less, that was going to look at leadership and management, but ended up doing something rather different. Alison, a very good morning to you. Thanks for joining me on Tice Talk. So, you wrote this article after the Messenger review, which all sounds very nice, and General Sir Gordon Messenger, highly decorated, as I say, he was supposed to write this big review about leadership and management, and you were quite hopeful. Tell us, Alison, you've read this report. I must confess I haven't. I've read the summary.
Lucky you, Richard.
Tell us, what should it have been reporting on and what happened?
Well, you know the phrase, don't shoot the messenger. I think in the case of the Gordon Messenger review, we will say, do shoot the messenger. So your viewers and listeners may know that Sajid Javid commissioned General Sir Gordon Messenger, former Vice Chief of the Defence Staff, as you said, highly decorated War Hero 1, 2 DSOs, to conduct this review. Now, many of us will suspect that the NHS management is an absolute catastrophe. We know that the NHS employs about 1.4 million people, of whom about only 300,000 are clinical staff, all right? So you've got about 1 million administrators in our NHS, and what we know is we desperately need frontline staff. So I think we were all really hopeful that this guy who'd done service in Iraq and Afghanistan was going to, put it to them, stand-up kind of guy, really starts sort of pointing out where all this NHS management layers needed to be culled. And what did we get, Richard? This just, talk about his guns being spiked. I mean, it's an absolute disaster, the review. Sir Gordon completely buys into the NHS's EDI strategy.
EDI, help us. What does that mean?
Okay, so EDI is equality, diversity and inclusion. And if you read this long report, as I've had the misfortune to do, what you discover is that patients, efficiency, delivery for patients, care for patients is really not very important, because what really matters is improving the NHS's equality, diversity and inclusion strategy. And given that the NHS clinical staff, about 40% of NHS clinical staff are from BAME backgrounds, that's Black, Asian, ethnic minority backgrounds. So the NHS is already immensely diverse and inclusive, which is great, but a huge proportion of our money is going towards thousands and thousands of hours spent on this EDI strategy, into which I'm afraid Sir Gordon could have said, we've got to stop this now, let's start spending the money on patients, but actually he was backing it up, which was horrifying to me, I have to say.
And why do you think that happened? I mean, did he bring in an outside team for a proper sort of complete fresh look at the structure, or has he used people internally from the bureaucratic blob who've essentially overruled him?
I think I'm struggling to think of a better word than nobbled, but I think he was nobbled, Richard. There was a Dame Linda from Leeds NHS Trust who was his partner in the review. The review is full of language which would only be used by NHS managers. It certainly isn't full of language that would be used by soldiers or down-to-earth people. Now, let's not forget, Richard, that the British public is about to pay from July an increase of 1.25 percentage points in our national insurance to raise £12 billion to help the NHS recover from the pandemic. What we are seeing, so far, all we've seen is a huge increase in management and about a 7% increase in nurses. I don't think any of your listeners and viewers would think that was the priority for this money. And the other thing I should say that Sir Gordon should have come down on is they are just having a huge structural reorganisation. They are going from the clinical commissioning groups to integrated care boards. And all the directors on the clinical commissioning groups are getting giant payoffs. And some of them, this is going to shock you.
No, please tell me that I know where you're going with this. I can't bear it.
Do you think any of them might be re-employed in the new integrated care boards, also on large? So more directors are being employed in the new reorganisation than were got rid of for giant payoffs in the last one. So, Gordon Messenger, shoot me now. Shoot me now. That would be my message.
It's just unbelievable. Obviously, for my listeners and viewers, this is tongue-in-cheek, what we're saying. But the reality is, of course, that the Health Secretary, I think, surely, Alison, he wanted a proper review that would help him. How do you think the Health Secretary has responded to receiving this review? Do you think he's actually read it, or has he sort of thrown his hands up in despair?
My hunch is that, I mean, look, Sajid Javid, he's a bright guy, isn't he? He's worked in the city, he's worked in management consultant. My guess is he wanted Gordon Messenger to come back with why is the NHS wasting so much money on management? All right, can I just say to you, Richard, there are entire buildings in London, Leeds, Southampton and other cities in the country which have nothing to do with hospitals. They are rammed with managers, NHS managers, all on high salaries, including equality, diversity and inclusion people who are commanding salaries in excess of £80,000 a year.
I suspect, Alison, that actually those buildings used to be rammed full, but of course now they're empty because many of the civil servants are actually working from home. It's an issue I'm going to be coming to later in the show.
Coming back to a very good question, I suspect Sajid Javid read the Sir Gordon Messenger review and did put his head in his hands, and then bits were leaked out. The statement put out to the media was report calls for war on woke and wastage. That was some of the headlines. In fact, because I've read it, I know the report called for nothing of the sort.
So classic government spin. And you've got a podcast every week, Planet Normal, so you get hundreds or thousands of messages and emails from people, I think particularly about the NHS. Just share a couple of those with us that you put in your article, Alison.
Well, I think one thing that comes through, Richard, is on Planet Normal and at the Telegraph, I hear from lots of doctors, nurses, receptionists, all sorts of people, paramedics. And what they say is, I really want to tell you about this, but I had an email from a GP this week, Fiona. She said, if I say this out loud, I will be vilified and punished. Okay, that's we pay the NHS. And the people who work for it, paid for by our money, dare not tell the public the truth.
So the whole culture's wrong, because surely the culture should be continuous improvement. Let's admit our mistakes, learn from them, and make sure we don't make them again.
Shocking culture of bullying and intimidation by management of very, very able people in the front line. I hear from people who are leaving because they cannot put up with the bullying and the lack of truth-telling to the public. The other thing, of course, in the Gordon Messenger report, you wouldn't know, Richard, it was written in a time when we have more than 6.5 million people on hospital waiting lists. It was literally, how can we make managers feel more comfortable and safe? I don't care about NHS managers feeling comfortable and safe. I feel worried about my listeners and readers who are saying they can't get a health appointment for love nor money. The other one I got this week, which I'm sure you will have been interested in, was one NHS insider wrote to me and said there had recently been a procedure at a leading private health clinic in the UK, which was an operation, a trans operation, to make a woman into a trans man, and the operation was carried out. It's a very complex, expensive operation, and the woman's eggs were frozen. All of this was paid for by the NHS. Now, if my daughter wanted to freeze her eggs, she wouldn't be able to get that on the NHS. No couples with struggling are able to have free treatment like that on the NHS. But all of the people involved in that trans operation and the egg freezing were sworn to secrecy and threatened that if any details got out, there would be punishment and hell to pay. Why do you think they wanted to punish people and threaten them, Richard? Why?
It's that, well, because they knew it's the wrong thing to do and it's not a good use of expenditure of our taxpayers' cash. So this is more bullying and a complete sort of cover-up culture that permeates the whole NHS.
Yep, that's right.
Truly.
And when you write about it, as I do, and I know as you've done, and when you express doubts, oh boy, do they come for you. I mean, these medical unions, they make Arthur Scargill look like Peppa Pig. I mean, they really hate any criticism, management bashing. The NHS Confederation said that Sajid Javid's very mild response to the Gordon Messenger review, they were disappointed by any evidence or any expression of management bashing. And I thought, they don't know they're born,
If an NHS quango has essentially sort of welcomed the review and supported it, particularly the NHS Confederation, I think that tells a massive story. My listeners and viewers loving it. Michael says, Alison Pearson, brilliant on TV, pointing about the stupidity and crassness and bullying in NHS England. Alison, thank you so much for your thoughts, the work you're doing to try and get some, proper quality performance and service by the NHS so that it is world-leading and brilliant and genuinely looks after those who it should look after, which is the patients, and get those waiting lists down. That was Alison Pearson, co-host of the Planet Normal podcast, columnist at The Telegraph. She's always battling away from that. But I want your thoughts, your views. Maybe you have had a fantastic experience. It's Tice Talk. It's the home of common sense. It's Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Talk TV, and that was Alison Pearson with her thoughts on the Sir Gordon Messenger review on the NHS, and goodness me, Twitter has exploded, literally exploded, with people's frustration and anger. One text message here says, Richard, where's that gone? It seems to have disappeared. Let's try and find that. This report by Alison Pearson makes my blood boil. The public are being taken for mugs, whilst these sponging NHS leeches steal our money. That's one thought. No messing around with the thoughts there. David, he says, General Sir Gordon Messenger was tasked to reform the NHS and reduce management and waste, ended up being an equality, diversity and inclusion review. Another one here from Sandy says, listening to Alison about the state of the NHS confirms the lunatics have taken over. Please never give up, Richard and Alison. We need you. Look, we want to try, we want the NHS to be brilliant. It should be. After all, we pay enough money. I mean, the amount of money we pay into the NHS is about average or above the average for developed Western nations. So it should be good. But the truth is, sadly, in many cases, far too many cases, the health outcomes are at the bottom of the list. Anyway, let's go to some calls and see what people think. Up in Newcastle, John is there. Hi, John.
Hello, Richard. My point is this. At least 50 years ago, because I'm nearly 80, I went to France on holiday. I found there that people in them days were waiting 3 weeks, twice a main, for an operation. I was amazed because where I live in Newcastle, it was around about 15 weeks. And fast forward the clock, 48 years, current we dance, and what do we find? Before coronavirus, we find that people in France were now waiting 4 weeks, Catracemain, and we still were waiting 15 weeks. We've never progressed in all those years, and I think it's a disgrace how they can treat our people like this. And I blame not just the present government, the governments beforehand. They're not fit for purpose, and certainly the NHS is not fit for purpose. We're led to believe, if it's true, that we pay a massive amount of money to the health service in this country, a massive amount, possibly the second highest in the world, apart from the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a question of money. I think it's the way that it is spent, and the data shows, yes, as I said, you know, we're spending at or above the average. I think it's the European average or the OECD average. But the reality is the outcomes are they're just not good enough. And your example there, John, seems to show that in terms of waiting times. Well,
yes, as I said, even today we are going on holiday soon, hopefully to France.
Oh, good luck with that.
Even last year, we found that the doctors come and see you in France. We can't even go to see a doctor here. We have to phone them up, and some people, in fact, there's thousands in this country, waiting 3 weeks to see a doctor, let alone an operation in 4 weeks, of course. This mind was before coronavirus.
That was before, and things have got worse, John, haven't they?
Oh, very much so. And I'm amazed at the people of this country. We seem to have a triple lock in my book, Conservative, Labour and Liberal. And I think they've all failed the British people over the decades gone by. And I look for reform, because that's what's needed. In France, you find that there was a Republican Party and a Socialist Party and a little bit of a Communist Party. Now there's about 6 parties in there.
There's all sorts going on there. It's virtually ungovernable.
Yeah, it's quite amazing.
Yeah, but, John, thank you so much. I've just got to I've got to take another call there, John. But that's John in Newcastle with his concerns. He feels, with his example, it hasn't made any progress in getting waiting lists down in many decades. Let's come down from Newcastle to Petersfield, where Rob is on the line. Hi, Rob.
Hi. Richard, it's about your £20,000 NI piece, and I'm afraid I think you're missing a trick.
OK.
That is a soundbite.
Just to be clear, it's 20,000. It's not on NI, it's actually on income tax, to be clear.
Income tax. Even that is a soundbite. And rather than go for a figure, which will be the headline, why not go for a principle? And the principle being you don't pay tax and get benefits. So whatever the cap for benefits is, the people in work do not pay tax, while those who are getting benefits are getting the same amount of money. After that, when the benefit cap kicks in, you start paying tax for those who are working above that. But go for the principle and you will win votes.
Now, that's it's a really interesting point you raise there, Rob. Essentially, you're saying that you shouldn't be paying any income tax, because that was part of my policy, if it's below the maximum level of what you could earn on benefits. I guess, Rob, the thing is about benefits is there are all sorts of different benefits for sort of different items on the list, so to speak. So in a sense, it's very much a moving feast.
There is, and that's the important bit. It's a moving feast. But there is a benefit cap, is there not? With minor exceptions or few exceptions for those who are severely ill and what have you. But the general benefit cap, I believe, is 23,000. Maybe that's in London. But there's something along those lines. And if you tag your tax policy to that, what you're not then doing is taxing someone to then give them working family tax credits back or something along those lines.
No, it's I'm with you on the principle here, Rob, which is that A, it's too complicated, and B, there's a massive, unfortunately at the moment, for too many people, there's a disincentive to work because net of tax, you're not doing as well as if you were on benefits.
Absolutely, and so therefore, make that a principle. And there will be things to work out and difficulties and their complexities, but they will be few and far between, and the cost of collection and redistribution will disappear.
It's a really good point, Rob. I'm very grateful to you. That's Rob in Petersfield with his thoughts that actually you should link the level at which you start paying income tax to the maximum cap on benefits, so that there's then a genuine incentive to get into work. Thank you, Rob, for that. From Petersfield, we're going to cruise gently to Coventry, where Andy is on the line. Good morning, Andy.
Good morning.
What's on your mind this morning?
I have a severe mental illness. I have bipolar, I have PTSD, and I have something called GAD as well. And I think the benefit system is it's not equitable and it's not fair. Just as an example, the cost of living payment that everyone has got, that means everyone on certain benefits regardless, has received exactly the same amount. However, I live on my own, and I'm likely to use considerably less electricity and gas than, say, somebody who has a family with children. And I know they will say it's too complicated to adjust it accordingly to people that live on their own or have less people in their household. But let's not forget that when furlough was required, that was done in a matter of weeks, and that was an awfully complicated thing for the revenue to do. So I don't see why it would be difficult for the benefits people to, I don't know, look at the council tax and see who lives at that address and then adjust the amount that they get accordingly.
An interesting point. So you think that it should be a little more targeted?
Exactly, absolutely, yes. And, you know, just on another off point, I think I had help from Coventry Mine to claim my benefits. But most people, you know, there's lots of people with mental health that don't know what they're entitled to. I got a free bus pass. I'm not 65, but it was based on the fact, because I'm medicated, etc., that I would never be allowed to hold a driving licence. I didn't know that, and I didn't get it until 2 years ago. I could have had it a long time before.
Indeed.
It's the same with PIP or DLA. I didn't know I could have that too. That made an enormous difference.
Exactly. Well, it is complicated. I think overcomplicated. The previous call inferred that. Andy, I've got to go to the break, but thank you very much for your thoughts. That's Andy in Coventry. Stay with us. We've got lots more messages, calls and guests. It's Tice Talk. It is, of course, Talk TV.
It's no holds barred on my show, Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Idiotic, insensitive, hypocritical.
The blows.
You must not do that.
The punch-ups.
Are you interviewing me or am I interviewing you?
The fights.
There'll always be somebody else to fight. Didn't come here for long, good day.
And the knockouts. It was a free and fair election, and that you lost.
Turn the camera off.
Come and find me on Talk TV. You know you want it.
Well, of course it's uncensored.
This is Talk TV News.
Good morning, I'm Emily Rose Adams. A government minister has insisted that Boris Johnson is the right man to lead the Conservatives into the next election after the Prime Minister claimed he wants to serve 3 terms in office. Despite 2 tough by-election losses this week, Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis said Boris Johnson wasn't fully at fault for those defeats.
We lost those seats in the backdrop of very, very difficult circumstances, not least for how the elections themselves were called. And even in Tiverton, the Lib Dem vote went up a couple of percent. The reality is our voters who had voted for us in the past didn't vote for us. And we've got to re-motivate them to come and vote at the next general election.
Well, the Prime Minister will later say now is not the time to give up on Ukraine as he's arrived in Munich for the start of the G7 summit. The UK, US, Canada and Japan have already this morning announced a joint ban on imports of Russian gold, with exports being worth £12.5 billion to the Kremlin in 2021. And in Ukraine, there's been fresh strikes on the capital Kyiv, with 5 people injured. Police in South Africa are investigating after at least 17 people were reported to have been found dead at a nightclub. It happened at a venue in East London on the Eastern Cape province, but police said it was too early to determine the cause of death of the young adults, who were aged between 18 and 20. Clarence House is insisting correct processes were followed after Prince Charles reportedly accepted a suitcase filled with almost £1 million in cash from a controversial Qatari politician. A spokesperson says donations from former Prime Minister Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim were passed immediately to one of his charities. And killer drivers could face up to life in prison as new sentencing rules come into force this week. New legislation will see judges able to hand life sentences to dangerous drivers who kill and careless drivers who kill while under the influence of drink or drugs. That's all for now. We'll have more in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk TV. Loads of messages and tweets coming in, some great calls there about the benefit system and messages about the NHS. And I think people genuinely want the NHS to be great and fantastic and easy to access, but too many concerns that actually it's just far, far too difficult. One here, a message saying, I've had to go private over 3 years. I've been told I cannot have an operation on my foot. If I do, I'll lose the foot. The NHS was negative on whatever I suggested. I can't even get a second opinion, which I should be entitled to do on the NHS. That was from Nikki. So lots of you. Keep those calls coming in, 0344 499 1000. We'll take those. I want your thoughts, your experiences. But meanwhile, what about the experience of travelling? Well, if you're travelling in the UK, you may need to go by bike or by car because it could be a summer of discontent on the trains. If you're travelling overseas, then don't bother taking any luggage because that probably won't get with you, or you might have your flight cancelled like my children just recently had. But the man to give us the latest update is, of course, the one, the only, the legendary Simon Calder, who is patiently waiting on the line. Morning, Simon. Where are you? Somewhere exotic. It looks like a nice office building.
Thank you. Yes, I'm in the Barbican in central London, actually, Richard, which, if you happen to be in the capital, is well worth exploring. It's also a place where you're almost certain to get lost. So, yes, you need to have plenty of time when you come here. But thankfully, I've managed to connect, and I will try and find my way out of here when we finish our conversation.
I'm not sure I'd call the Barbican exotic, but you may well get lost in some of these airports, in the queues. What's the latest on the potential BA strikes and staff shortages?
Right, well, let's start with the BA strike, since you mentioned that, OK? So there are about 700 members of the RMT and the, forgive me, not the RMT, that's the rail lot, the GMB and the Unite Union, who are passenger service agents. Now, Richard, you and many of your viewers and listeners will be familiar with these excellent people. They're the friendly souls in BA uniforms who meet you when you go into Terminal 5 at Heathrow or Terminal 3, the airline's kind of home base, and they will check in your bags. They'll crucially these days also make sure your COVID documentation is in order, because there's still many places which require you to show proof of vaccination or test testing or both. And then at the departure gate, they'll make sure that you get on your plane with your cabin baggage. And yes, anybody travelling this summer, my one plea is if you possibly get away with cabin baggage, do yourself a favour and do that. You won't need to wait and check it in. You won't get it sent to the other side of the world, or indeed left behind as part of the baggage mountain at Terminal 2 at Heathrow, and you won't need to wait around a bit for it at the other end.
So Simon, what's the issue seems to be that BA and EasyJet are struggling with staff shortages much more than anybody else. Is that right? And if so, why?
OK, well, that is, of course, it's extraordinarily complex. During the week, we had Johan Lundgren, the boss of EasyJet, actually telling me it was partly down to Brexit and the fact that they just don't have the pool of labour that they previously could tap. British Airways and EasyJet have both promised an extraordinary range of flights from their home bases at Heathrow and at Gatwick, respectively. Actually far more than they have the resources for. So British Airways currently cancelling over 100 flights a day. I count 116 today that they've grounded, short-haul European and domestic flights. But people haven't really noticed. There was a short notice cancellation to Greece this morning, to Nice. But apart from that, most people have been given 2 or 3 weeks' notice, so you can make other arrangements. EasyJet, on the other hand, from Gatwick, cancelling fewer flights, but doing far more late notice cancellations. And it's been pretty miserable overnight. There's an awful lot of people who woke up this morning who might well be watching, who wish they were somewhere else, with the greatest respect. We saw short notice cancellations to Fuerteventura, to Geneva, to Palma in Mallorca yesterday. I'm being contacted by people on Twitter saying, hang on, I'm a mother travelling with 2 kids. Our flight's just been cancelled, and EasyJet says, sort yourself out with a hotel yourself. It's messy.
I suffered exactly that earlier in the year. I was in the departures lounge at Gatwick Airport one Sunday evening, and sure enough, EasyJet just cancelled the flight with no notice whatsoever. But what are they doing wrong that other airlines seem to be getting right that don't seem to be doing the cancellations, or are we just not hearing about them?
No, look, let me tell you exactly what everybody else is doing. So Ryanair, by far the biggest budget airline in Europe, they are having some local difficulties, my goodness me, this weekend. They've upset some of their cabin crew and other staff in Portugal, Italy, Spain and Belgium. And there have been, I reckon, about 60 cancellations so far this weekend on Ryanair, most of them not involving routes to and from the UK. But compared with their overall programme of flights, it's about sort of 2%. So very annoying if you're part of that. Jet2 are playing an absolute blinder. Yes, they had some local problems at Manchester a few weeks ago, and also at Bristol Airport, and that terrible weekend at the start of the main half term. But they've turned things around, and what they've basically done is just align their capacity with the resources they've got. Ryanair say, oh, we didn't sack loads of our staff during COVID, and so therefore we kept them flying, and therefore they're in a good position to go. But EasyJet and British Airways, I guess, let's be kind, Richard, because everybody's got to be kind these days. And let's say that they were just, in the industry of human happiness, being over-optimistic about what they could do in a perfect world where there was never any disruption, nobody ever went sick, air traffic controllers never walked out.
And what's this issue, Simon, with the issue of security clearance, where some of the airlines are blaming, I think, essentially the government for being too slow on security clearance? Is there any truth to that, or is that just an excuse?
It is genuinely happening, but I don't think it's fair to blame the government on this. What's happening is that if you want to get a job at an airport or working for an airline, Richard, they are going to want to have a look at your employment history for the past 5 years. Now, obviously, lots of people, particularly during COVID, might have had 3, 4, 5 jobs, and they have to get references from all of those places. And guess what? the person you worked for 3 months during the pandemic, top of their must-do list isn't getting the reference done for Richard Tice because he's now applied for EasyJet. And so that's adding lots of time. And these companies are putting dozens of people purely on phoning up employers saying, oh, go on, give us the reference. And so those rules might change. But at the moment, it is slowing things down. EasyJet say they've got enough crew for about 30 or 40 flights who are just grounded waiting for clearance.
So I take slight issue with what the boss of EasyJet said, that it was the fault of Brexit, because we've got the largest population ever here, and we've got loads of people on out-of-work benefits. But it's not just in the UK. There are problems elsewhere in Europe, aren't there? Just very quickly, Simon, before we have to go.
Yeah. Sure, yeah. OK, so Amsterdam Airport's got a chronic problem with the security queues there. And actually, we're into the strike season in Europe. And I fear those French air traffic controllers could be making our lives more of a misery within a week or two. But good luck, everybody. Almost everybody will get away where they need to be, when they want to be there. And it's not the end of the summer as we know it.
Goodness me. Thank you, Simon, indeed. That's Simon Calder, the travel editor at The Independent. The very thought or mention of French air traffic controllers seems to take me again back to the 1970s, indeed the 80s and the 90s, because, you know, historically, whenever there was a problem, it was always the French air traffic controllers. Anyway, stay with us. We're going to be taking your calls, your thoughts, your views after the break. It's Tice Talk. It is, of course, Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. The time is 11:44. There's so much going on. After my show, of course, from 1 till 4, there is Trisha Goddard with her usual fantastic show. And then 4 till 7, he's back, the one and only Kevin O'Sullivan, fresh from last night with Mike Graham. He's got his show. And then, of course, Mark Saggers after that. Later in my show, from 12 o'clock, I've got the Director of Policy at the shale gas industry, UK onshore and gas. He'll be here in the studio talking about the review this week that's going to the business sector. And if you've got some calls, some questions about the shale gas industry, then give us a call, 0344 499 1000, and Charles McAllister will be available to take those calls and messages. Loads of tweets pouring in. I think I've really struck a nerve about this benefit system. Everybody wants it to be effective, to work properly for the genuine in need. But one here says, and this is a text message, "Dear Mr. Tice, thank you for your Sunday sermon. Thank you for somebody who's speaking up, address one of the many issues which has contributed to the demise of the country. Long-term claimants, multiple children, but are able not to work but continue because they can get benefits, and that negatively impacts in so many ways." Another one says, "Couldn't agree more, Richard. I'm a registered nurse, no children, always worked, careful with my money. I know people who claim benefits because they simply can." And she's saying there are other entitled to other cut price concessions. It is obscene, she says. "I would support benefits for anybody who needs them, but I'm disgusted at those who make a career out of it. It isn't fair. I hear about it on the doors. I think I've really struck a chord here." But let's see what Anthony in Leeds thinks, who's patiently waiting on the line. Good morning, Anthony.
Yes, good morning, Richard. Yes.
How are you doing? What are your thoughts this morning?
It's about these two parties, you know, Labour and Conservative. I think they should go, to be honest. I think we need something else.
Well, but they're never going to go, are they, Anthony? I mean, in reality, it's a two-party system. That's the issue with first past the post.
Yeah, but they're just like dinosaurs. We need to get rid of them. We need to get rid of all councils in England, sack a lot of them, sack these at universities as well, telling our children a load of rubbish at universities about this country, sack them, sack that Sadiq Khan of London.
After your list, Anthony, there's going to be no one left.
Well, I don't care. What we need is a new fresh start in this country, and tell them French to keep off of our fish. That we need to build our navy up again to make it the strongest in Europe.
It sounds like you're a Brexiteer, that is for sure. And
listen. I wasn't happy about that statue in Bristol either. What they should do with the city of Bristol is put a windfall tax on that city to pay for that statue.
Yeah, it was completely wrong. So let's turn it on its head, Anthony. Let's try and turn it on its head. What are you happy with?
Not happy with this country. That's what it is. It doesn't work anymore.
That is the issue, isn't it? Too many things
it doesn't work.
are not working.
In Parliament, we've got Labour Party who's obsessed with European Union. That European Union has poisoned this country. That's what it is.
It's not good. There are so many areas, so many things that simply don't work. I'm going to be talking a bit later about working from home and the councils, brand new office buildings, empty.
Sack them all, sack a lot of them.
But there are services that need to be delivered, of course, Anthony, but the problem is that they're being delivered badly.
Yeah, but we've got people supposed to be to private schools. It's supposed to be.
I mean, that shouldn't make any difference where you go. What we want is efficiency, we want competency, we want people to be to do a good job for which they're paid for.
No, it's not working. It's not doing it, is it? Not working, is it?
It's not at the moment, Anthony. You're quite right, but we've got to keep optimistic. Thank you, Anthony. Indeed,
all right.
Anthony in Leeds. There, he's not happy. He thinks that Britain isn't working. He read out a list there of people who should be sacked. It was quite a long list, but anyway, nevertheless, let's see what Avrant wants to say in Colchester. Good morning. It is still just the morning. Hi there. How are you doing?
Good morning, Richard. Very well, thank you.
Good. What's on your mind?
Well, it's the health service, actually. My wife spent a spell in hospital 8 years ago, and it was obvious to me then that the health service, the staff were run ragged. There just wasn't enough of them. They were just overwhelmed then. At that stage, I took the trouble to write to my MP, and indeed I sent a copy to whoever was the Prime Minister of the day. I think it was possibly Cameron. I invited them to come and spend a day in our hospital and see for themselves. I got a reply from my MP, and it was from, he'd written to somebody in the health service, saying that there wasn't actually a shortage of funding and all was well, basically. I then corresponded with him, arguing the case a bit longer, and then I let it drop. And then last week I got into my head, I thought, no, I'll write to him again. I photocopied all the other correspondence that we'd exchanged, put a new letter into him saying, in 8 years nothing has got better. I haven't heard a thing from him.
No, that's the issue, isn't it? And sadly...
Wasted 8 years navel gazing. Well, it's probably longer than that. I mean, I only experienced this 8 years ago. It could have been going on longer for all I know. It's just ridiculous. Nobody's got to grips with it for years.
But look on the bright side, Avron. They've got a lot more equality, diversity and inclusion managers. Is that good news?
Oh, what? I'm sure they have. Yeah. They need a few more people at the coalface.
Well, that's the issue, and that's your experience is so relevant that if the frontline staff were run ragged 8 years ago, and since then...
They were literally... I had to go and get some of them off their tea break to attend to my wife.
Yeah, but since then, the number of beds has reduced, the number of frontline staff hasn't increased. The only thing that has increased is that we're pouring more and more money into what feels like an incompetent, a vicious, a hole of sort of just a management hole, a bureaucratic blob. That, for me, is the concern. And the latest Messenger review that was supposed to deal with that has utterly failed.
How do we get this message across? Because I've written to my MP numerous times.
Well,
I encourage other people to do a bit.
It's not easy, but I think the truth is that as it gets worse and worse, more and more people are going to say it's got to be reformed. It isn't actually the great religious sort of joy that the establishment seem to make it out to be. Avron, thank you so much for your thoughts on the NHS, his concerns. He's right. It needs to be a lot better. We want it to be better. Let's go from Colchester to West Sussex, where William is on the line. Hi, William.
Oh, hi, Richard. How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, all right. What's on your mind?
It's about the welfare and benefit system we have in this country. And the biggest problem we have in this country is we have a non-contributory welfare system. On the continent, France, I know for certain Spain, definitely in Italy, you have a contributory welfare system. So you'll never get anything until you've actually done something first. And that's also why we've got a big immigrant issue, because people, they land in Europe and they make a beeline for Calais to get to Britain because they know that they can come here and get benefits straight away. Whereas if they stay in France, Spain, Italy, they know they'll actually have to do some work.
Right, so, I mean, it's a fair point.
The other thing we have, Richard, as well, we also have in-work benefits as well.
We do indeed. I mean, there's about 3 million.
And I tell you, and people laud the national minimum wage. The minimum wage became the maximum wage.
Yes.
It meant that people like Tesco's or estate agents or anyone, you think of a host company, they could say, look, we'll all just pay the minimum wage. And then the government, or actually not the government, the taxpayer can pick up the rest. So they should actually abolish the minimum wage and people should just literally be able to go from job to job to pay, perhaps be offered overtime to increase their wages. No one does overtime anymore.
Well,
I'm 53. When I was in my 20s, I used to crave. I used to ask my manager, "Got any overtime this weekend? Got any overtime this weekend?"
Indeed, you see, you're quite right. I mean, I've talked about out-of-work benefits, the 5.3 million, and I'm looking at that, but I haven't yet really, William, looked at the in-work benefits. But you're quite. What it's essentially doing is the taxpayers subsidising companies. Yeah,
well, Richard, you know your idea for this a tax allowance of 20,000 before you pay any income tax.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I would make that an allowance of I'd actually make it about 18,000 and no income tax and no national insurance. That way, someone can say, right, I can earn £1,500 a month, because 12 times 1,500 is 18,000. I can earn £1,500 a month and not have to part with a single penny. Then after that, between 18 and 24,000, another 6,000. then just have a 10% rate. So you're slowly getting yourself into a higher tax area. But the quid pro quo for this very generous thing is we abolish all in-work benefits. That's the quid pro quo. So if you want to keep loads of money, actually 18,000, not pay a penny, then another 10,000, another 6,000, you'd only pay another £600 in tax.
I mean,
that's your quid pro quo.
Yeah, and I'm going to look at that because it's too complicated at the moment.
Another thing I would introduce, and this would turn the left into a tailspin, I would actually introduce a complete transferable marriage tax allowance. So if you were earning £36,000 a year on my scheme, you could take your partner, your wife or your husband, if one of you wanted to stay at work, you could earn £36,000 a year and not pay a penny in tax, because you could take, and your wife could stay at home to bring up the kids. I know that might sound a bit sexist to people, but the reward for providing this country with stable nuclear families again is that you can have one of you stay at home and keep double tax allowance.
All of these points, William, are about increasing the incentive to work. You're quite right. There's a variety of ways you can do it, but that has to be the principle. I've got to
for nuclear families.
I know, I'm with you, again. William. I've got to go shortly to the break for the news, but thank you so much. That was William in West Sussex with his thoughts about that. I think that we've got to encourage an incentive to get people out of benefits, whether they are out of work or indeed whether they're in work. I mean, in-work benefits, I need to look at that more because, again, it seems to be wrong that essentially the taxpayer is subsidising companies not to pay a genuine wage. And there's no better time to do that, surely, than when there's a labour shortage, when there are lots of vacancies. That absolutely must be right. Coming up after the break and the news, we're going to be talking to Charles McAllister, the Director of Policy at the lobbying group for UK onshore oil and gas, talking about shale gas, the review this week. Stay with us. It's Tice Talk. It is, of course, Talk TV.
On TV, on radio, and on your smartphone. This is Talk TV. Talk TV News at 12.
Good afternoon. I'm Emily Rose Adams. A government minister has insisted that Boris Johnson is the right man to lead the Conservatives into the next election after the Prime Minister claimed he wants to serve 3 terms in office. Despite 2 tough by-election losses this week, Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis said Boris Johnson wasn't fully at fault for those defeats.
We lost those seats in the backdrop of very, very difficult circumstances, not least for how the elections themselves were called. And even in Tiverton, the Lib Dem vote went up a couple of percent. The reality is our voters who had voted for us in the past didn't vote for us, and we've got to re-motivate them to come and vote at the next general election.
Well, the Prime Minister will later say now is not the time to give up on Ukraine as he's arrived in Munich for the start of the G7 summit. The UK and France have today confirmed they'll give more support to Ukraine, while G7 countries have announced a joint ban on imports of Russian gold, with exports being worth £12.5 billion to the Kremlin. Well, in Ukraine, there's been fresh strikes on the capital, Kyiv, with 5 people injured. And the mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, said it was an attempt to intimidate Ukraine before the G7 summit.
The building has been destroyed, and we understand there are many people under the rubble. They are alive. The rescuers are trying to get them out. There is a lot of smoke, and we are doing our best to rescue them as soon as possible.
Police in South Africa are investigating after at least 17 people were reported to have been found dead at a nightclub in the southeastern city of East London. East Cape Police said it was too early to determine the cause of death of the young adults who were aged between 18 and 20 years old. Clarence House is insisting correct processes were followed after Prince Charles reportedly accepted a suitcase filled with cash from a controversial Qatari politician. The money, thought to be worth nearly £1 million, was given straight to one of the prince's charities. Killer drivers could face up to life in prison as new sentencing rules come into force from Tuesday. Judges will be able to hand life sentences to dangerous drivers who kill and careless drivers who kill while under the influence of drink or drugs. The new sentencing regime far exceeds the previous maximum penalty of 14 years. And almost a third of people say they can't afford to accept invitations to weddings. Research from Experian found the average cost of attending one is now £567 per person. And guests are finding creative ways to save costs by staying up all night, travelling on public transport and wearing the same outfit on multiple occasions. Those are the latest news headlines. Still to come, your TalkSport update, but first your weather.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
An area of low pressure sits over the UK in the northwest this afternoon, bringing heavy and frequent showers here, but the sunshine will hold on across some east and southeastern areas. Taking a look at the details for 7 o'clock this evening in Scotland, we'll see a mixture of sunny spells and heavy showers. Still blustery with temperatures in the range of 13 to 15 Celsius. Heavy showers will also continue across Northern Ireland and Northern England with strong winds through the Irish Sea. Temperatures around 15 to 17. Wales will also see further heavy showers this evening, but it should be largely dry for the Midlands and across East Anglia, with plenty of early evening sunshine. Dry for much of southern and southeastern England. Those showers continuing for the West Country. Temperatures of 15 to 20 Celsius and staying unsettled into the early hours of the morning.
Trust us to take you there. Times Travel sponsors Talk TV Weather.
Well, it's been a slow start at Headingley, but New Zealand have extended their lead past 150 runs as England's cricketers chase a final 5 wickets in the last test of the series. England claimed 4 wickets in quick succession yesterday afternoon to see the tourists start the day on 168 for 5. They're now 203 for 5 and lead by 172, with England still yet to bat. TalkSport understands that Manchester United are aiming to complete the signing of Barcelona midfielder Frenkie de Jong by next week. United are close to agreeing a fee in the region of £68 million for the Dutch international, who is new manager Erik ten Hag's top target. The club hope to have it wrapped up by June the 30th. Meanwhile, United have poured cold water on suggestions that Cristiano Ronaldo could move to Chelsea, as it's been revealed he's not for sale. The 37-year-old Portuguese talisman's returned to the club last summer, and Erik ten Hag has told Chelsea that Ronaldo is still part of his plans. And former England rugby international Luther Burrell has opened up about a culture of racism in the changing rooms at former clubs. The 32-year-old, who plays for Premiership side Newcastle Falcons, says he's been the subject of slavery jokes in the past and has been referred to as the N-word. That's all for now. I'll be back with more updates in half an hour.
The Sunday Night Club is your club. I'll take you inside the dressing room, from the terraces to the boardroom, to ask the questions you want answered. There is no membership required for the Sunday Night Club from 7.
Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk, and good afternoon. Yes, we have flown, we've cruised into the third and final hour of my show before Trisha Goddard. Lots of messages and tweets coming in, and we're going to be talking about shale gas shortly, which is something very dear to my heart, and I've got a great guest in the studio. But first of all, just quite a lot of tweets coming in about Reform Party, the number of votes in the by-election, and whether I could just touch on that. Look, of course, any party, mine included, we want more votes, not less, and of course we'd have liked more votes. There's two reasons for it, though. Firstly, we're still a young, new brand. Anybody in any walk of life knows that it takes time to build a brand, whether it's in business, charity, anything, industry, or indeed politics. The second thing is the issue of first past the post and a wasted vote. Many people on the door say, I like what you stand for, but I must get the incumbent out. In this case, in both seats, people wanted to know that they would get the incumbent out. And for them, that meant voting in Wakefield for Labour, in Tiverton for the Lib Dems. So there was massive tactical voting, and people, unfortunately for small parties, see that as a wasted vote. Under proportional representation, which all our small parties support, and indeed parts of the Labour Party support, there's no such thing as a wasted vote, and therefore you get genuine equal representation based on the proportion of votes. So that's a key thing. We're new, and we are therefore, as a brand, we're building up the awareness, and people are concerned about this issue of a wasted vote. What I can tell you, on the doors, particularly in Wakefield, in the north of England, I mention all the time the issue of levelling up, of the cost of energy, and how actually, if we use the treasure under our feet, shale gas, then actually we would have dramatically lower energy bills. I've got a new expression, which is £1 trillion of levelling up by drilling down. And I have to say, I can't think of anybody in Wakefield who didn't agree with our policy on shale gas. They know that it would bring jobs, they know that it would bring cheaper energy, and people are very patriotic. People want to buy British in all walks of life. But I'm delighted that Charles McAllister, who is the Director of, it's a very long title, Policy, Government and Public Affairs at UK Onshore Oil and Gas. Charles, welcome to the studio. It's great to see you again.
Thanks, Richard.
Seriously, on the doors, people are so supportive of shale gas. They know that it would reduce our energy bills.
Yep.
They know that, in a sense, it was there to be done, and then the government bottled it.
Yep.
But there's a big week ahead, isn't there,
Yep.
Charles, in terms of where we are with the potential to lift the moratorium
Yep.
on the process of extracting shale gas that most people use, which is fracking.
Yep.
Tell us what's going on this week.
OK, so this week the British Geological Survey will be submitting its report to the Business and Energy Department, and it's going to be submitted this Thursday, so the 30th of June. Now, obviously I haven't seen it, so I don't know what it says, and I don't know what the government plan is because we haven't been told formally or informally. So I don't know if it's going to be released on the day. I don't know if they're going to take time to review it. But for our industry, this is one of the most important weeks since the moratorium was introduced 970 odd days ago.
OK, great. And anybody, Charles is with me for 15 to 20 minutes. Anybody who wants to ask a question about shale gas, about the industry, the pros, the cons, please do give us a call. You know the number 03444991000. So this review, Charles, is therefore clearly important because they wanted to look at new evidence, didn't they?
Yep.
About the methods of extracting new, different sort of improvements in technology.
Yep.
I read a shocking figure, which is that the gas price per therm, who knows what that is, but anyway, is 5 times higher in the UK than last year.
Yep.
I think in the US it's only gone up by about double.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you look at the gas price, gas price typically varies throughout the year. So in winter and June, it's positively tropical in London in the last few weeks. Gas demand's been quite low, but the price is 5 to 6 times higher than it should be. Now, in the winter, it tends to go up, not as high as we would have seen during the crisis. So, 800 pence per therm over Christmas. And I think the implications of that are really, really important, because a group called Cornwall Energy Insight, which is like a market analysis group, have said that actually not only are the energy bills going to go up in October of this year, they're going to go up again in January. So it will mean, if you look at Christmas or winter 2020, the energy price cap was set at about £1,000. In January 23, it's going to be £3,000. So we're talking about a trebling of the energy price cap in a very short period of time.
In a very short period of time. And don't forget, I've just had a message here actually. Please keep the number on the TV screen. I'll just remind my production team, 03444991000 if you want to speak to Charles. But this review, the business secretary made a statement last week, didn't he? Giving a speech, which was, it looked as though it was sort of reopening the door. It was almost like sort of opening a wedge in the door. What did he say, and what are your sort of hopes from that?
Okay, so he said that effectively that it makes sense if we're going to use fossil fuels and use oil and gas, that extraction, which is really, really positive. And he said it was an imperative, especially in the context of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now, again, as I said, it's very difficult for me to actually be able to judge what's going to happen this week, but my gut feel is cautious optimism, because I think the case for fracking in the UK, quite frankly, is blindingly obvious. It's fundamentally logical.
Okay, so you hope that he will respond. I guess my concern, given what we've seen from this government, is they're very, very, very good at a quick headline and then kicking the can down the road. And I guess we have to wait and see as to whether he gives any more positive spin or whether he just says we're looking at it and we'll carry out another review. One of the operators, Ineos, made the offer of having a carefully supervised and monitored test site. Do you think that is? Do you think that may be taken up by the government? Is that the right way forward?
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think there is merit in this sort of test site pilot project. What we could do is get sort of a multi-pad approach done through, and especially in the East Midlands.
And just help us, what is a pad?
Okay, so a pad, it's about the size of a football field.
Okay,
and we
I can get that.
Yeah, and we can get between 10 and 40 wells on one of those sites. So one of the other companies is a joint venture at a site called Springs Road in the East Midlands. Ineos is one of the partners on that, and there is a proposal here to drill sort of 5 pads, 80 wells, and we could provide enough gas within 12 to 18 months at initial production for 3 million homes in the UK. Wow. So really important point here is, in terms of all energy technologies in the UK, see, in terms of delivering kilowatt hours per kilometre squared per year, shale gas is the best technology in the UK, no question.
So if we had a test site, that would test everything in and around the process of drilling, of extracting, and the gas that would extract, you would then that would be able to be used. So that would then, and you're saying for sort of 12 to 18 months, is that right?
Yeah, initial production within 12 to 18 months.
Initial production?
Yeah.
Okay, and then that would essentially be used for many homes locally?
3 million homes locally, because we can inject it into the high-pressure grid or into the local grid.
Okay, right. So that seems very, very logical and sensible. And then I guess you'd monitor that site. How quickly, if shale gas is approved, how quickly would it make such a significant difference to the supply of gas that the price would come down? Because this is my my goal, my nirvana, my dream?
Yeah, the most important question. So there's 3 ways that shale gas can reduce prices in the UK. One is local. So as part of our community benefits package, we'll give a share of revenue to local people. So we did some polling and we said, look, if we give you 25% off your bill within a set area, would you accept fracking in your local area? And a majority in the north of England, overwhelming majority said yes, which is consistent with what you said discussing with the people of Wakefield. So that's one way. 2 way is by displacing liquefied natural gas, because what we're doing at the minute is sending up essentially a high price signal to attract these boats into the UK. The quicker we do it, the quicker we develop shale, the less we have to do that, the quicker price will come down.
So there's an important point there, which is that if we're importing gas from overseas, unless it's coming by pipeline, I think just from Norway, then it has to be liquefied, put on these massive ships with these great sort of mounds on them. Basically, it's liquefied into liquefied natural gas. That creates CO2 in that process. You've then got the CO2 created from the shipping fuel consumed with the ship coming across the various waters. And then you create more CO2 when you vaporise it in order to send it back through the pipelines.
Exactly. So the pre-combustion footprint, so up until the point of delivery of LNG being imported, is 4 times that of shale gas. So if we don't increase natural gas production in the UK, we increase our gas supply carbon footprint exponentially. So as a means of reducing the UK's carbon footprint, we have to start fracking in the UK.
Sounds a bit like a win-win to me, that actually we could, if we adopt shale gas exploration, we can do 2 things. One is to reduce the price of gas, and 2, then actually we can dramatically reduce by millions of tonnes the amount of CO2 created.
I would say it's more than a win-win. It's more a win-win-win-win-win, because what about levelling up the UK? Jobs, billions in tax, investment, balance of payments. I mean, pick one.
So it goes on. Pick one. I mean, what's there not to like? Well, we're going to be taking any calls on this issue. If you've got a question for Charles about anything to do with the shale gas industry, onshore exploration, then please do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Lots of messages here. Here's a good one. If shale gas has to be sold at the international market price, how does it help the price to consume? We will hold that thought from Chris on Twitter and come back to that, because that is a really key question about how it's going to genuinely reduce the price. Stay with us in this 3rd and final hour. It's Tice Talk at the home of common sense. It is, of course, Talk TV. Welcome back, my friends, to Tice Talk. We've got Charles McAllister, the Director of Policy at the UK Onshore Oil and Gas. We're talking shale gas. We've got tweets coming in. We've got calls coming in. Just before the break, Chris said that question about the international markets.
Yep.
How we deal with that. What's the answer?
2 questions, or 2 points on that. One is there's no such thing as an international gas price. It's all set regionally. So the UK has a gas price, like the Netherlands has a gas price. Any introduction of increased supply into that will have a negative impact on that. Some of the
on the price, as in push the price down.
Absolutely, yeah. We saw that when the UK was oversupplied with imports a few months ago. The price came down, whereas in Europe they weren't able to do that. And we have to ask the question: if you were to shut down the North Sea now, for example, the UK gas price would go through the roof. So that's one general point. Second one is we've already offered, or my board would be willing to sell gas at a fixed contracted price into the blue hydrogen production facilities of the future. So that gives guaranteed price to them and to downstream users of hydrogen.
Okay, that's very helpful indeed. And also, there is another point here, which is the cost of transporting liquefied natural gas is huge. I mean, it can be 20, 30, 40% of the cost of the gas.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, look at there's 43 countries in the world that import LNG. We are effectively engaged in this international game of tug of war to get supplies. There was this ridiculous situation just before Christmas last year, and what happened was this LNG tanker left the southern United States, went through the Panama Canal, got halfway across the Pacific, then got a phone call to say the gas price in the UK is going mad.
It was a sort of bidding war.
Turn it round. It went back to across the Pacific, back to the Panama Canal, all the way across the Atlantic and into Wales.
Because there's a limited supply of these LNG ships.
Exactly.
Charles, we're going to take a call from Brendan in Hartlepool, who's got a question for you. Morning, Brendan. No, good afternoon, Brendan.
Good afternoon, Richard. Good afternoon, Charles.
Good afternoon.
Am I correct in understanding that they set a ridiculously low bar for earthquakes for fracking? It's about the same as a truck rumbling past your house. And if it's more than that, you're not allowed to frack. Yeah. Isn't that stupid?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, sir. So they set the limit for us at 0.5 on the Richter scale, which last time was on your show, Richard, I showed to you. If I sat down in this chair again, they'd shut us down, surface vibration equivalent. So you're absolutely right. It was set ridiculously low. If you look at what the moratorium was based on, it was based on a report done on the Preston New Road 1Z well. The largest event of that well was 1.5 on the Richter scale, which is the surface equivalent of me dropping a honeydew melon in your kitchen, sir. Even if we look at the larger event, the surface vibration from that was half what is permitted at construction site. So if I was building a house beside yours, if we induced half of what was permitted at that, shut it down as well. So it's we want a level playing field.
I mean, it's a great point, isn't it, Brendan? Earthquake sounds very scary to everybody.
That's what it put. That's what put it. Well, it didn't put me off because I understood it, but that's what put lots of people off. The thing that the fracking site, the houses are going to fall down. It's an absolute load of rubbish. Yeah. Will that be done away with with this new moratorium? The moratorium?
Brendan, that is a great question, and I suspect we don't know the answer, but it is certainly something to be looked at.
Yeah.
Brendan, thank you so much for that. I'll get a chance to answer that in a minute because we've got another question in, I think, from Margaret in Reading. Good afternoon, Margaret.
Hello. I don't care what the experts say or anything. Common sense tells you that if you did fracking, it would cause an earthquake. And all the experts and everything, who cares about them? Look at what they did with COVID. Absolute rubbish. No, shale gas would be very, very dangerous.
Okay, Margaret. That's a totally fair question to ask Charles. Charles, how do you respond to Margaret in Reading?
So, I'm slightly shocked, but what is it about the science? What evidence have they gave, or what evidence do you think we've gave that you don't trust? Is it, I mean, the seismic levels that we would induce have been induced from geothermal wells, have been induced from coal mining for several years. I mean, there's no question of shale gas's safety. It is a safe process, and we have maintained that we can develop shale gas in the UK safely and environmentally sensitively. What is it about the process?
I think, Margaret, the other point I would make is that I think there are over 600,000 shale gas wells that have been drilled in the United States, and they've got the benefit of dramatically lower gas prices. But Margaret, come back on Charles's response there. Has that helped you at all or not?
No, it's just common sense. But there we are. There's not an awful lot of common sense around.
Well, we tried to be... No, Margaret, we tried to be the home of common sense. But I would have thought, okay, Margaret, it's common sense that if you look at the United States, where they've had 600,000 plus wells, and actually that's been safely conducted. They're all, well, in a few states in particular. Then if they've successfully done that, then surely we can learn the lessons, tweak the technology, always incrementally improve it.
Absolutely.
Do you not buy into that, Margaret?
America is huge, and I bet these places where they're drilling, etc., are anywhere near built up.
Okay, Margaret, let's ask Charles that.
There are loads and loads of wells that have been drilled. Some housing developments are actually built around the wells because they bring so much employment into the area. Now, if you're worried about sort of population density in the UK as a comparison, Margaret, 80% of the population in the UK lives on 7% of the land, so there is room for development in the north of England. And if we're concerned about land use as well, one shale gas pad is roughly about 2 hectares. To generate the same amount of energy from one of those pads from a wind farm, you need an area about 700 to 750 times the size. So in terms of delivering kilowatt hours per kilometre squared per year, it is one of the best technologies in the... You should come and see a site if we do get a positive result.
Margaret, the common sense answer to this is that you must come and see a site so that you can feel either contented or not. What I do know is that just northeast of Denver, there are hundreds of sites for of drilling wells, and there are, as Charles just quite rightly says, there are communities literally all around them. Another question here coming in on Twitter. Thank you so much, Margaret, from Reading, there with a great question. A question here from Martin says, Charles, how much fracked gas has been produced between 2011 and 19? I guess, not sure if that's internationally or here in the UK. What's the answer in the UK?
The only time there's been a shale gas well, a horizontal high-volume hydraulic fractional well, was from Preston New Road. And because they weren't actually able to fracture that well properly because of the traffic light system, the earthquake limits, the amount of gas put out, it was good per stage. But they couldn't fully frack the well, unfortunately. The exact number, I think it was 200,000 metres cubed. We've got it in our report, but I can come back and clarify that, no problem.
Okay, well, we can do that. We've got lots of great messages coming in here. One says, shale gas, yes, is a no-brainer, but what about a 7 barrage? That's different. Another one here from, I think it's Lady Charles, says, Charles McAllister talking a whole lot of sense about domestic shale gas production, rather than importing via pipelines and sea freight. I just think many people want this, but there's been press misinformation. So your job, Charles, in 30 seconds, you've got to sort the press out.
Yeah.
You've got to get the headlines right.
Yeah, well, I mean, it has to be a fact-led enterprise, quite frankly. I mean, I love this industry so much that I am keen. I will never quit until we get loads and loads of shale gas wells in the ground. So, I mean, I think it has to be... We have to engage fairly, honestly, with people, with the media, much like...
And I think it's a key point about people locally near shale gas wells, if it's approved, to get a significant discount.
Yep.
And therefore they see the real benefit.
Well, I mean, that's part of our offer in the community benefits package. So we're in discussions now, our board, to increase that, to increase the amount of money we give to local communities, and it can be used for whatever they want.
Make sure it's generous. Charles McAllister of UK Onshore Oil and Gas. Keep those questions and calls coming in. Thanks very much indeed. We'll be back after the break. It is, of course, Tice Talk on Talk TV.
It's no holds barred on my show, Piers Morgan Uncensored.
Idiotic, insensible, hypocritical.
The blows.
You must not do that.
The punch-ups.
Are you interviewing me or am I interviewing you?
The fights.
There'll always be somebody else to fight. Didn't come here for long, did they?
And the knockouts. It was a free and fair election, and that you lost.
Turn the camera off.
Come and find me on Talk TV. You know you want to.
But of course it's uncensored.
This is Talk TV News.
Good afternoon, I'm Emily Rose Adams. A government minister has insisted that Boris Johnson is the right man to lead the Conservatives into the next election after the Prime Minister claimed he wants to serve 3 terms in office. Despite 2 tough by-election losses this week, the Northern Ireland Secretary Brandon Lewis said Boris Johnson wasn't fully at fault for those defeats.
We lost those seats in the backdrop of very, very difficult circumstances, not least for how the elections themselves were called. And even in Tiverton, the Lib Dem vote went up a couple of percent. The reality is our voters who had voted for us in the past didn't vote for us, and we've got to re-motivate them to come and vote at the next general election.
Well, the Prime Minister will later say now is not the time to give up on Ukraine as he's arrived in Munich for the start of the G7 summit. The UK and France have today confirmed that they will give more support to Ukraine, while G7 countries have announced a joint ban on imports of Russian gold, with exports being worth £12.5 billion to the Kremlin. Well, in Ukraine, there's been fresh strikes on the capital, Kyiv, with 5 people injured. Police in South Africa are investigating after they found 22 people dead at a nightclub. East Cape Police said it was too early to determine the cause of death of the young adults who were aged between 18 and 20. An SNP MP has resigned his party membership as he faces a police investigation into allegations of sexual harassment. It means Patrick Grady, the MP for Glasgow North, will now sit as an independent. The Metropolitan Police confirmed they're investigating an incident which took place at a London pub in 2016. And former England rugby international Luther Burrell has opened up about a culture of racism in the changing rooms at former clubs. The 32-year-old, who plays for Premiership side Newcastle Falcons, says he's been the subject of slavery jokes in the past and has been referred to as the N-word. That's all for now. We'll have more updates in half an hour.
Welcome back to Tice Talk here on Talk TV. Fascinating chat, lots of messages and thoughts, questions coming in about shale gas, the opportunity for that. We'll be talking about that next week as well after this review has come in. But meanwhile, we also need to move on. We need to go from domestic important issues to vitally important international issues and talk about Ukraine, because we are now, of course, many months into this horrific war. And whilst it may be slipping down the pages in the newspapers, it is still vitally important. And, you know, the Ukrainian military, they are losing 100 to 200 soldiers every single day. And the knock-on consequences we're all experiencing here in the UK and elsewhere in the world in terms of higher energy prices, inflation, and the prospect of food shortages. And there's a real issue about whether or not there's going to be Western fatigue given all the other pressures on budgets and things. Well, I'm delighted now to be joined this afternoon by Cormac Smith, who's the former strategic communications advisor to the Ukraine Foreign Minister. Cormac, good afternoon. Thanks for joining me on Tice Talk. So,
Richard, good afternoon to you, sir. It's great to join you.
No, thanks, please. So,
thank you.
You and I know how grim and how desperate this situation is, but it feels like we're in a long war of attrition, and I guess one of the concerns that's rising up the agenda, Cormac, is sort of fatigue. And, you know, we're making, I think rightly, we're sending over military hardware. There's also humanitarian aid. The Prime Minister's talking about loan guarantees. But the public are starting to ask the question, Cormac, hang on, how much is this going to cost us relative to the cost of living crisis here at home?
Richard, 2 things. I first came across the term Ukraine fatigue back in 2016, which when I was first sent out by Her Majesty's government to work for the Ukrainian government on behalf of our government as part of our support to the Ukrainian government then, and it was something we feared with the sanctions that had been put in place in 2014 after the annexation of Crimea and the invasion of Donbass. Unfortunately, in terms of the current situation, it's something that I have been fearing for a long time. The truth is that there are some of our Western allies are not fatiguing. They've never been at the races in the first place. You know, we can talk specifically about the French and Macron saying, you know, that we must not humiliate. We must not humiliate Putin.
That's right. So I guess when you first talk about that fatigue, the difference now is that we've got, you know, people have got real sort of cost of living crisis going on, and so those questions are growing, and I guess there's an important process of answering that, and otherwise support may start to slip if the numbers grow and grow.
Richard, I think there's two things. I think there's one, and most people in the West are still not getting the fact the Ukrainians are fighting on our behalf. You know, Oleksiy Reznikov, who's their Minister of Defense, said on a CNN interview before Christmas, he said, we don't expect any of our allies to put boots on the ground. Just give us the weapons we need. We will do our own fighting. By God, the Ukrainians have shown how they are capable of fighting. And Richard, we're still not giving them heavy weapons quick enough.
So this is my next question. You know, you get great announcements from the US, from the UK and others about, you know, we're sending more military hardware. And then you have the Germans, they generously talked about sending some helmets before sending a few more. But there's a question mark, actually, are they really sending the equipment, or are they just making the announcement to satisfy the press and their citizens, and then it's being delayed?
Sorry, Richard, I presume by that question you're referring to the likes of the Germans and the French.
To the Germans specifically.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I will use the example of the press opportunity that Macron, Scholz and Draghi went to Kyiv for about a week ago now to announce that they would consider giving EU candidate status to Ukraine. And I really believe, I mean, our Prime Minister has been accused of photo opportunities and so forth. And believe me, Richard, I am no fan of the current Prime Minister's, many of his domestic policies. But on Ukraine, the Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, has got it right. But actually, it's not just Boris Johnson. On Ukraine, Britain has got it right. And I'm actually very proud that I played a very small part in our support of that great country back between 2016 and 2018. So to answer your short answer to your question, yes, it's a photo opportunity. It's a little bit of spin. It's great. The Ukrainians really want EU membership, but that ain't going to happen for 5 or 10 years. What they need is armament, and they need us to properly sanction Russia back to the bloody Stone Age, which we're still not doing.
The second issue, which I think is going to rise up over the coming weeks and months, is the issue of food shortages, the grain being stuck in warehouses in Ukraine, Cormac. Some suggestions about whether or not even essentially we should be providing escorts to the ships in order to get that grain out, because otherwise the potential for food shortages and famine will rise up the agenda. Is that serious, or is that actually too inflammatory if there were ships escorting the grain out of Ukraine?
No, I don't think it's too inflammatory. I think there are many ways to do this under the auspices of the United Nations and a coalition of willing nations. Look, I mean, this is a good point to stop for a moment and really think what Russia is doing to the world. I was doing a little bit of research and preparation before I came on to speak to you today. There was a United Nations Security Council resolution in 2018, Resolution 2417, and it was unanimously passed, which obviously means that Russia backed it, and that was to decline from using food as a weapon of war. That is exactly what Russia is doing now. Look, you know, Ukraine is one of the world's great bread baskets. They supply 10% of the world's grain, I think 14% of the world's corn, 47% of the world's sunflower oil, but mainly to low-income countries.
So your point is Putin is deliberately using this, essentially, as a sort of a food weapon of war?
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And our response, with the exception of, well, not with the exception of Britain, because certainly the countries in like the Baltics and Poland and the Yanks have been very, very good. But far too many of our Western allies have wanted to go to appeasement rather than standing up to this thug.
Cormac, thank you so much indeed for your thoughts there. That's Cormac Smith, former advisor to the Ukraine foreign minister. He's in no doubt at all. It is a big issue. We need to keep talking about it and understanding it. Just before I go to the break, we've got Julie in the Scottish Highlands. Hi, Julie.
Hello.
Hi, what's on your mind this afternoon?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I think we should make Rob from Petersfield one of your previous callers to the Prime Minister, and William from West Sussex as the Chancellor.
Oh, there we are then.
And, yes, because it's ridiculous paying people, taxing people, and then making them claim.
Of course, in-work benefits.
Absolutely ridiculous. But my main reason for my call is the NHS.
Yes, I've just got a minute, Julie, so go for it.
Okay. Well, I've basically had my whole body damaged by the NHS from the tip of my toes to my brain. I'd like to know what happened to the 32.8 million that Captain Tom raised when they can't even afford to educate their staff to know the basics, a respiratory team, to know the basics of PTSD and the basics of...
So you've personally had some bad experiences, it sounds like, of treatment.
Extremely bad. I've had my whole body damaged from the age of 13. Well, even at my birth, my body was damaged. My brain was damaged.
So that's ongoing. And
yes,
are you still seeking treatment?
Yes, because I'm one of the longest survivors of the contaminated blood scandal, which I expect you're aware that the inquiry is ongoing.
Yes, and, I'm only vaguely aware, Julie.
Yes, well, I was infected with hepatitis C at age 18, again, because I was abused by the NHS and treated very, very badly. OK, Julie,
well, I hope you get through that, and I'm sorry to hear of that. That's Julie in the Scottish Highlands. She hasn't had good treatment from the NHS. I know that is a concern of many, and clearly Julie, like all of us, wants decent, proper, prompt care and treatment. Thank you for that call. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be talking to Guy Adams of the Daily Mail. His article yesterday about working from home. Very important. Stay with us. Don't go anywhere. It's Tice Talk. It's Talk TV. Welcome back to Tice Talk. We've only got 15 minutes left before Trisha Goddard. We've got so much more to do. Well, I've talked before about government wasting our cash, not spending our money properly, and that's one of the reasons why taxes are so high. And I've talked before also about working from home. And guess what? We now have uncontroversial proof of the two things. Because yesterday, and if you haven't seen this, just whatever you do, get hold a copy of this article by Guy Adams, double-page spread in yesterday's Daily Mail about councils. Yes, local authorities, they're glorious, gold, or not quite gold-plated, but brand new council buildings, office buildings that aren't occupied because the staff are working from home. I'm delighted that Guy Adams is with me to discuss this on online. Guy, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I read your article yesterday, and it's fair to say I was sort of boiling and bubbling over more than usual. I mean, you've obviously been round a number of these buildings, these sort of newly refurbished or indeed brand new buildings, and lots of them are empty. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, so what basically has happened is that since the pandemic, private sector offices are still not, I mean, occupancy is still down a bit, but companies have started getting people to go back to work. Councils, on the other hand, seem to almost invariably have a policy of come into the office as much as you want, and inevitably there's a number of local authorities that have spent huge amounts of money in the last few years on pretty expensive new office buildings, and these buildings are now sitting empty. And last week I went to visit one of them in Slough.
I think we've got a clip here that we can show of this video. Actually, it's not quite ready. Sorry, Guy, keep going.
That's all right. So the Slough Council spent £40 million buying and then refurbishing an office block in 2018. It's right in the centre of town. It's really nicely fitted out. It's a bit like going into one of those sort of Silicon Valley company headquarters. You know, there's beanbags everywhere and smart lights and pot plants and all the rest of it, except for one thing, which is there's no one there. It's completely empty. And I got a little. I was shown around by a councillor, and I couldn't go into every bit of the building. But I would say that, I mean, the one floor is completely empty. It's not being used at all. And the other floors are probably, I suppose, a quarter of the desks were full on that particular morning. And this was the middle of the working week. It wasn't a rail strike day. It was on Wednesday. There's no reason at all why staff shouldn't be there. And the counter-argument to this always, Richard, is that councils will tell you, and this is the other sort of strange thing about it, when you ring them up and go, look, what's going on here? They actually are remarkably unapologetic about this. They say, no, our staff like this, it means they're more productive and whatnot. But then when you drill down into are these councils actually doing a good job? You know, if a taxpayer, a local resident rings them up and wants to talk to someone about their council tax bill or report a problem, can they get through to a human being on the telephone? Well, at Slough, you can't. These scenes... That's
interesting. The scenes on the video now, they're showing this... Yeah. That's right. We're just showing the video for those watching of a completely, almost completely empty, very glitzy, nice, clean, smart office building. I get the point. So, I mean, Slough's got massive financial problems itself anyway, hasn't it, Guy?
Yes.
So what's the answer? Should they just sell off all these buildings?
Well, I mean, there are two possible answers. Answer number one is the chief executives of these authorities should grow a spine and tell their workers that it's time to come back into work. And if they fancy carrying on working from home, they need to negotiate. With their line managers as an effective regime. Answer number two is to indeed sell these buildings off. Now, Slough is going to have to sell this building off because it's been so poorly managed that it's got about 600 million quid's worth of debt. But there are other examples all over the country. Cambridgeshire, for example, has a brand new headquarters. It cost £18 million. Now, in April, some reporters from our sister title Mail Online visited the office there on a weekday, and there were 3 cars parked in the car park. And the receptionist basically said this place is closed. You know, no one works here.
And I think this is the key point, isn't it? And the thing is, if Jacob Rees-Mogg can't get civil servants in Whitehall back into the office, he's got no chance of getting council workers back into their offices. I guess people wouldn't mind so much if phones were answered promptly from people working from home and that productivity was as good or better, but that's just not the case, is it?
Well, in Slough, the councillor who showed me around Slough's headquarters said, look, you know, his ward, which is actually a pretty, I suppose, not deprived, but, you know, not an upscale area of Slough. There's a lot of housing, there's a lot of vulnerable people, elderly people who live in council houses. And he said, look, he showed me the house. He said, look, here's an elderly resident's house. There's 30 tiles missing from their roof. It's leaking. Those tiles blew off during Storm Eunice in February. And I can't get anyone from the council to arrange for them to be fixed. He's got other residents with, you know, leaking pipes. They've got damp in their homes. Again, he can't get the council to fix them. Another councillor, an independent councillor, said, look, you know, our pavements, and it's true, you drive around, you can see that the pavements are covered in weeds. There's sort of parks aren't being kept properly. Playgrounds are falling apart. And these very basic things that people want their council to do aren't happening. And another bizarre thing really is this isn't just a problem. Slough is Labour run. It's a Labour council, more or less has been constantly for the last 30 years. But this is happening at Conservative councils too. Fascinating piece in the Times newspaper on, I think, Monday last week. They put in a load of FOI requests to councils and asked, you know, what percentage of people are in your office on any given day. There were some Tory councils that only 1 in 10 office workers are going into the office on a normal work day.
Guy, just whilst you've been talking, I've had a message in saying, I know someone on security in a government building in Exeter, it's empty. This is obviously all over the country, Guy. I'm afraid I think you've got your work cut out to keep investigating. Yeah. Guy, thank you so much for coming on at short notice onto Tice Talk to talk about that. Talk about your article. As I say, do read that. It is absolutely shocking. We're going to head down from Guy Adams there on the Mail down to Dorset, where Michelle is waiting quickly before we go to hand over to Tricia. Hi there, Michelle.
Hi, Richard. Lovely show. Really enjoying it.
Great, thank you. What would you like to say just in a minute?
Well, I've got an analogy for you. You think that your fridge might catch fire. It's too noisy, maybe costing too much money. So you think, well, I'll sell the fridge. I'll get all my food from my next-door neighbour. That works all right for a while. And then one day you say, oh, have you got a pound of cheese? He said, well, that'd be £25. And basically, that is our policy on energy. So, yeah, we need to get fracking.
You are so right, Michelle. It's a great analogy, actually. We sort of assumed that the sun would always shine, it would always be OK importing cheap energy. That's fine until the sun doesn't shine. And then there's a problem, isn't it, Michelle?
Exactly. Power to your elbow, Richard.
Well, we're battling on, Michelle. I really appreciate the call. That's a great analogy. Keep them coming in there. Loads more messages and tweets and calls, but we can't take them all because, unbelievably, 3 hours has flown by and waiting patiently, and I don't think Tricia would appreciate it if I stole half of her show to carry on. Tricia, good afternoon. It's sometimes how I feel. There's so much more to discuss. How are you doing, Tricia?
I know, and there is a lot to discuss. Obviously, two things, as you know, I'm in Connecticut, so two things I'm going to be looking at. Roe versus Wade, with a British barrister, but she trained partly in the US, so she's got a view on both sides. Also, the gun debate, the whole gun debate, we've been following that with a research looking at gun violence. They're not talking about banning guns, but what the effect this will have, as you know, Joe Biden has said it doesn't go far enough, but what will it do?
And Tricia, just very quickly, Roe versus Wade, extraordinary, shocking decision. Is that just going to increase the very, very divisive nature of US politics?
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. But, you know, one of the things that nobody takes into account, Richard, here, is that if you haven't got coverage, health coverage, it can cost you $26,000 to have a baby. And the sorts of people this hits just don't have that money. So, you know, so there's a whole economic argument about this as well. But we've got that, our faith panel, and lots more.
Fantastic. Don't go anywhere, folks, because there is an amazing 3 hours with Tricia Goddard, of course, over the next 3 hours. And then you've got Kevin O'Sullivan from 4 till 7. And after that, you've got the amazing Mark Saggers. It's been a busy show. It's been full-on. Messages still coming in. Pablo says, Richard, materially, most of us are better off. Society and civilization, on the other hand, is circling the plug hole. there we are. That's one to ponder over the Sunday lunch. A huge thank to my incredible production team. I will, of course, be back this time next week. So much to discuss. It's just been full on all this week. Thankfully, I haven't got to talk about the BBC and trans activism and 150 genders. But this is also the first celebration day. Yes, a new annual day of remembrance for people who are no longer here. Really important to that, to remember that. I remember some of the lovely quotes from my mother.